Aww. Aww. Everyone.
I do remember. No, the Wi-Fi is good. Anyone tech savvier than anyone up here?
You trying to hook up to? You trying to hook up to the?
The stick's supposed to pop right up, and it's not popping up.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to locate this thing. No, it'll find that. What are you trying to find? Like,
How are you? Sorry. Yeah. If you're gonna go live, you might as well go live. They're trying to get their memory stick, I think, in.
Yeah.
let's try this. Oh.
Yeah.
It just says,
So it was connected.
Yeah. Really?
there it is, right here. Okay, so there you go. Oh, darn it. Did it? Shoot. It is? Okay. All right.
It would be, yeah.
Oh, okay. I ejected it. You just pull it out. Yeah. You pull it out? You can put it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Cool. Hi everybody, sorry for the delay. We had a little technical difficulty. That is my daughter Mia when she was born, if y'all are curious. Using my laptop to get Delaware Engineering's presentation up and running. Before we do that though, might as well get things started. I see Dan here. Is Tim Dempsey here? He's here? Okay. We're gonna start with the pledge. Absolutely. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
Is it really?
I'll move it back again.
All right, first item on our agenda is the Town of Montgomery Citizen of the Month. This is something that was newly established by this board at our reorganization meeting in January. And the hope is that after our first honoree, we have a lot more correspondence and applications in terms of just individuals like yourself petitioning the board to honor some pretty amazing citizens here in the Town of Montgomery. The first individual we'll be honoring for the month of February in 2020 is Tim Dempsey. And for those that don't know, Tim's contributions to the Town of Montgomery are many, especially as a veteran of the armed forces serving our country. He has come back and really been a very important point person in terms of veteran services and working with all of our veterans organizations. Specifically, Tim was asked to be nominated for this honor as Citizen of the Month because of all the things that he does to run our veteran ceremonies here at Town Hall. Tim, without further ado, I'd ask you to come up and please accept this plaque on behalf of the Town of Montgomery for Citizen of the Month for February 2020.
I'm speechless. That's the good news. I'm very honored to receive such a high honor from the great town of Montgomery. I just want to say that I've always believed that teamwork is paramount in every walk of life and every aspect of human endeavor. What really counts is teamwork. And I've been gratified to be part of a lot of teamwork in my time here. I returned to the area after time in service in April 1995, and the teamwork has just been wonderful. So everything that gets accomplished, we can probably look back on it. There's teamwork there. So I thank you.
Take a picture of you guys together.
There you go.
Can't expect much now. I'm in a picture. Good?
Thank you, Tim.
Excuse me, if I may, every December 7th, which is Pearl Harbor Day, there's a ceremony down in the village of Montgomery. The river goes by, and Tim Dempsey is the master of ceremonies. I've been going there for the last 10 years. He's been doing it for 10 years. He brings in the American Legion, he brings in the VFW, he brings in some of the kids from the schools to come down, and it's a beautiful half-hour, 45-minute ceremony. So mark your calendars. December 7th, day in infamy. Tim's the master of ceremonies, and thank you for that too, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Tim. Much appreciated.
To add to it, that he's also the master of ceremony for the Memorial Day and Veterans Day here at Town Hall for anybody who hasn't been here.
Right, so yeah, as we said, he runs all of our Veterans Day and Memorial Day services here at Town Hall. And if you didn't know that we had those services and we offer here with the town, please stop by. We usually promote them. I'm sure we'll promote them on our social media and our website. I believe it's usually on the Sunday before that Monday, and it avoids some of the village celebrations that we have throughout our town as well. Thank you again, Tim, and for everybody's comments on Tim. And hopefully use this as an opportunity to nominate someone else in our community that you believe deserves an honor such as this and to be recognized for all that they're doing. All right, Delaware Engineering. Have we engineered this setup all right?
There's a chance.
Okay, if not, just do your best. And for those of you that don't know, Delaware Engineering is currently contracted with the town providing engineering services, potential water and sewer services that they could help with. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Good evening. My name is Mary Beth Bianconi, and I'm a partner at Delaware Engineering. And I think we have our technology working. We do. It's amazing. So that we can do this brief presentation for the board. As Brian said, we've been working for the town now for a little while. We're going to go over who we are as a firm. There we go. Ooh. Who we are as a firm, the continuing retainer agreement from Michael J. Aiello, PE, who has been the town engineer here for many, many years, an overview of the current infrastructure opportunities and constraints here in town, a brief discussion about infrastructure master planning, some capital planning and project finance discussion, and then lastly, contractual matters in relationship to the town engineer that is proposed to be hired. We'll try and keep this quick because I know you have a lot on your agenda and there's a lot of folks here. So Delaware Engineering, we're not from the state of Delaware, we're from the Delaware River watershed here in New York. We've been around for 30 years. About 85% of what we do is municipal engineering for communities just like the town of Monroe. 25% is industrial, and we work very specifically on industrial challenges for water and wastewater. We work for people like GlaxoSmithKline, Chobani Yogurt, and other companies along those lines. We have about 65 professional and technical personnel, and those are located in offices in Albany, Oneonta, Red Hook over in Dutchess County near Hyde Park, Monticello, and most recently here in Goshen. We're down the street from the County Government Center in the old music hall. Commitment to Orange County and its municipalities. We've been here for a while. I had the pleasure of working with Brian when he was the mayor over in Walden. And we helped with some problems at the sewer plant there. We've also been working with a number of other municipalities here in the county, and right now we're assisting the county in evaluating issues regarding the Harriman wastewater treatment plant, which is a little complicated, as you might imagine. Our corporate philosophy is that public infrastructure should support community development. Community development is what you define it to be. Your infrastructure is the backbone of your community. It's what allows you to have the things you have in your community. So at the end of the day, if all we do is put a pipe in the ground, we failed you miserably. It should achieve other objectives for you, whatever they are. In terms of environmental quality or quality of life, that's the way that it should work. The retainer for many, many years, 28, which is a long time, Mike Aiello, has been your town engineer. He was here as a consultant though, and I know he was here so much that it seemed like he was a direct employee of the town, but he was here as a consultant, and he was also the operator of record for your water and sewer systems. That's a pretty unique arrangement. In most communities, those are separate jobs, but here that worked for you for many, many years. He pretty much did it all, chief cook and bottle washer. For those who've worked with Mike, you know that he has that capacity. When Mike agreed to come work with us, we had a discussion with the town board who was here at the time last fall and said that we certainly don't want to leave the town in a position where you don't have the coverage and the professional services that you need. So we honored that retainer agreement and continued it, and we will continue it until you decide that you want to do something different. And that, I believe you have an RFP for a town engineer to pick up on many of the administrative and non-water sewer issues. And so, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about the contractual matters later on. But we have been continuing in that role. Mike has been continuing in that role. But in addition to Mike, you now have the resources of 65 more professionals. That includes engineers, scientists, technicians, professional planners, construction management and inspection personnel, and additional, Mike has the unique skill of being both an engineer and an operator. We have several people on staff who are in that position as well. And we also have with us tonight Bill Bright, who is one of our chief operations people. So we have that resource to offer to assist you as you go forward. Current opportunities and constraints. I'm going to actually have Mike cover this because this is really his deal with both the water and the sewer system.
Just elaborate, I suppose.
Yeah,
on
just a little. Just keep it brief.
I can be a little bit difficult to do. A lot of people here have heard me say it over and over again, so it might be repetitive, and we've touched on it with Kristen and Brian since they came on board. Both. We're looking at sewer now. Town has multiple sewer districts, primarily 2 large ones, with all being served by a common sewage treatment plant that is nearing capacity, at capacity, depending on the extent of inflow and infiltration, which I'll touch on before I leave here. So there's a need to expand capacity, regardless of that, because of the sewer treatment plant that's in existence. It was always, because the limited resources the town had at its disposal about 20 years ago, it really was a 20-year solution. We've approached that. We've approached the life cycle of the plant that's there, regardless of capacity issues. About a year and a half ago, the town agreed to go work with Pippin Gandhi, a local wastewater engineer, to design a upgrade, expanded wastewater treatment facility. Those plans were submitted to DEC in October, and comments were just received yesterday, as a matter of fact. Not too many, so we should have resubmittal to DEC and hopefully an approval within 6 to 8 weeks. The big issue that has always been facing the town is, how do we fund this? Not just wastewater treatment plant expansion, but the collection system as well, because a big portion of our collection system, without getting too far into the weeds and nitty gritty, is considered a septic tank effluent system, where the homeowners and businesses have septic tanks. The effluent that leaves there is highly corrosive. Over time, it really eats away at primarily concrete structures and steel structures, which is what's at the treatment plant now. So that has to be addressed, because a system like that really isn't conducive to expansion, to serving surrounding areas which are in demand of central source services. Regarding the water, you want to go on to the next? Water, if anybody can see it, we have a fragmented system of water systems, but with a strong nucleus of the primary water system, which is Water District 1. As with sewer, there's a need to expand to surrounding areas. And there's also smaller systems that are aging in need of replacement, and the ultimate solution would be really to have a consolidated water system, whereby that can provide quality and sufficient water quantity to customers for drinking water purposes, as well as fire protection. This is where the conversation can really go into the weeds, so I know we're supposed to have a walkthrough on Monday, and the board will be more brought to speed when we're in the field and you can see exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Mike.
So moving along, we're trying to keep this going here. So Mike just listed some of the issues. I know some of you have gotten his email, which is like, I think, 5 pages long, that goes through lots and lots of things. So one of the things that I know is very challenging as a town board is to say, okay, I've got a smart engineer giving me a list that's 5 pages long. What do I do? What's the first thing I do? What's the second thing I do? Where does the money come to pay for it? How in the world does it happen? So one of the things that we've had a lot of success with communities recently in doing is doing master planning for infrastructure. And I know the town is interviewing folks to do comprehensive planning on a land use side. Master planning for infrastructure goes hand in hand with that, and it is the same thing. It is saying, okay, what do I have? What do I want to retain and keep? What do I want to expand and change? How do I want to guide and direct this infrastructure that is the backbone of our community? So I have a couple pictures up there of 2 different master plans we've done recently. I brought copies for you I'll leave them with you for you to look through when you can't sleep tonight, because I'll tell you they're that exciting. But what they do is they look at existing conditions, what are the maintenance issues, regulatory influences. That's a really important one. We don't want to plan for today, we want to plan for tomorrow. What are we going to have to do from a regulatory perspective? What are the community's needs and demands? What is the fiscal condition? We got to pay for stuff. So how are we paying for things? Who's paying for things? Are there grants? Is there low-cost financing? Are we bonding things? Are we raising rates? What is the story, right? There's all of these options. So evaluating a range of options, providing recommendations, and then action plans so that you as a board can be in the driver's seat and say, okay, I understand my infrastructure, and I understand the priorities I've been told, and I understand these are the paths I could take, and it gives you information. We don't make the decisions, you do, but we give you that information so you can make those decisions based on facts. Not, well, I wonder, or what about, or what if, based on facts. Very useful, and again, ties into the comprehensive plan. We're working in a community in Westchester where they redid their zoning and their comprehensive plan to allow very, very, very high density development. They're a very dense community to start with, but they wanted to redevelop an area of the community that had formerly been a hospital. It was like blocks and blocks of this hospital. They tore down the buildings, it's now vacant. So they decided they want high-density development there. Their neighbors have high-density development, and there's a little jealousy going on. Well, that's great, and they zoned it that way, and they have a proposal for it. The problem is no one ever looked at their infrastructure to see if their infrastructure could support the high-density development. And the answer, unfortunately, now that they're way down the road and have a builder, is no. The water system can't support it, the sewer system can't support it. That's a problem. So the idea is, and I'm not saying you guys would do that per se, but the idea is plan together. Know what you want and plan it together. So that's how it ties into the comprehensive plan. Capital planning and project finance. And I know people in the audience can't see the little sheets of paper. They're in these books. But basically what they are is they're looking at, those two sheets of paper come from the Village of Monroe, not too far away from here. They're focused on their water system. The one that's kind of bigger and more like a square is actually an analysis of their budgets, revenues, and expenses over time, so that they can see how are we doing as we go forward, what's happening, do we make enough money in our rates to pay the bills, do we make too much money, not enough money, those kinds of things. So that's what that one analysis is. The other analysis is actually a reevaluation of the way they charge people. This was done in 2013. Initially, there were two user categories. There was everybody, and then there was bulk purchase. They sell water outside of the village. There was bulk purchase, and what we discovered was that was inequitable. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who live in a tiny little house, were paying sometimes more than guys next door who own a gas station and are part of a multi-billion-dollar company. Doesn't seem like a good idea. So we restructured their rates to accommodate fairness and equity, make sure they had enough money, deal with cash flow issues. They had a series of cash flow issues. When the bills were due, they didn't have the money in their pockets. And then also to plan for improvements that they needed to make. They planned $4.2 million worth of improvements on the basis of the master plan that I'll give you. They made the determination they wanted to make those improvements. There was a priority list, and when you look at this, just to know they did everything on their list, and they're back looking, because this was 2013, which unfortunately was a long time ago. They're looking at doing another set of another set of capital improvements. So they chose to adopt their document as a public policy document. And they did that so that as they were going forward, every board wasn't having to wrestle with these issues. Because it was very public, and because people knew, and because it was based on information that anybody could look at, the public, board members, anybody, they decided to make this a policy. And they use the spreadsheets that were created to track their budgets as they go through time. One of the ones I didn't put up here because it's got a lot of numbers on it was a predictor of costs over time that they adjust annually so that they can make sure that their rates stay up with the costs. It's a tool that, again, was used to help the board be informed. Project finance, so how do we pay for things? There's obviously taxes, not super popular. The reality is there are low-cost financing systems, programs out there, and there are grant programs that the town will qualify for. Most of the grant programs function as not bags of money. It's kind of too bad, but they're not really bags of money. But what they do is they reduce the amount of money that the town would borrow in the long run, and that's what the taxpayer pays back, and that's where the value is. The picture that I know is very hard to see is on Environmental Facilities Corporation letterhead, is dated December 22nd, 2019, so it was just a little bit ago. It's addressed to the mayor in the village of Suffern, and it's telling him that he got a $2.25 million grant for his sewer project. This is a program called the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act program, and this is a program that will be available to the town. Now, on the left-hand side, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of stuff, there's some schedules and timelines and stuff. Whenever you use someone else's money, you gotta jump through hoops, and you're on their schedule. So that's something that, again, in the master planning and in working, say you have this sewer project that you're looking at, is to figure out, okay, if we, bonding it at whatever rate you can get is one way of looking at it and paying for it. Another way is to say, well, do I want to go through the state process to see if I can get low-cost borrowing available to me at a lower interest rate than I could get myself if I went out and bonded it, which is possible. And can I get that in combination with a grant, which at the end of the day reduces the cost to taxpayers. So that's really project finance. as you can tell from what I just said, it's not about chasing grants. It's about coming up with a strategy and thinking really long and hard about how you want to pay for things, what is the appropriate way to pay for things. The dollar that is in the taxpayer's pocket today is not the same as the dollar that's there tomorrow. It's not the same as the money you guys have in your bank account, and it's not the same thing as paying off bonded debt, because there's interest associated with that. So we try to work our way through that and come up with something that is very, a plan. It is scheduled, it says exactly who's doing what, when, and when could we expect to get an announcement of a grant. We had told the mayor in Suffern that we thought we would get this grant announcement 4 days before he actually got it. It's pretty good. And the reason we can do that is because we do a lot of this. This is sort of our world. So he's a happy guy. You can feel free to call him. His name is Ed Markunis. He's a really nice guy. He was one of, I believe, 11 of these grants that we got. We got somewhere around $22 million worth of these grants this past year for $54 million in capital projects. So it's out there. It can be done. It takes time and focus, but it can be done. Contractual matters and our relationship to the town engineer that's proposed. We work in many, many communities where we are the water and sewer specialists. In case you can't tell, this is our thing. It's what we do, and we don't do it all. And we're not the planning board people, and we're not dealing with the culverts and the bridges and those kinds of things. We're specialists. So we have that relationship in many, many places. And if the board would like, we can certainly give a list of those. But we have that relationship in many, many places. And it works really well. You're getting the people who are the best at doing whatever the thing is that you need. So for now, we are continuing that retainer agreement so that you have the support and the services that you've always had through Mike. When you tell us that that needs to change, it will change. You know, we're waiting, the ball's in your court. But we're here to support you, and we certainly don't want to leave you in any kind of a way not having the service that you need. What we do in many communities, and we can do it very differently everywhere, but we do in many communities is we have a couple of different kinds of agreements with the community. One of them is an agreement for general engineering services, which is on a time and materials basis. So there's a rate sheet, and it says Mike's rate is this, and Mary Beth's rate is that, and Bill's rate is this. And when you need us, you call us, and we can answer questions, we can help you. Like, a lot of times in the early phases of a project, you don't know what you're designing, you don't know what you're doing, you're still trying to find out what the problem is. Sometimes this is the best way to go. It's not a high expense, you can just stop it at any time, there's no commitment, but it's a way to get access to those resources, very low cost and on demand. When you want it, you get it, when you don't want it, you don't pay anything. It's kind of a nice deal. So that's something that we do with a lot of communities. It's kind of an underlying agreement that just gets continued, because again, you may have something come up, you know, you may call and say, hey, we have a beaver dam and we need to get rid of the beaver, what do we do, you know? And we have, actually people can answer that question. So that's a good way to do it. Pre-project development, conceptual engineering for things. Some stuff you may say, hey, what if we explore this? And then it doesn't become a project. Well, we do it under this agreement, and then it's nothing. There's no contract to cancel, there's no commitments of any kind, it's just we figured it out. Then the other type of agreement we have are specific professional service agreements for projects. We already have one with you, and that was to do something called a flow management plan for your wastewater treatment plant and your collection system. So that's a contract that says very specifically, we're gonna write a flow management plan, which out there in the world has meaning. It's something at the DEC, it's a particular type of analysis and document, and there's costs associated with that, and it says this is the price, and here's when it's gonna get done, and this is the product you get. And we do that for a lot of folks. One of the things about that is when you do those projects that are paid for by other people, they want that contract. Because they want to see, well, what am I paying for? You know, that it's legitimate stuff that's supposed to be paid for by their program. And that's it. Question?
So before we get into any questions from the board, I just wanted to reinforce why I asked them and presented having them do the presentation. The first is an introduction, a proper introduction. I remember sitting in the audience and the board, that some of you that are still here kind of got introduced to them via a letter saying that Mike would be retained by Delaware and that's who we'd be paying in terms of the services. I think that really undersells what it is that they offer, as you can see. They're a full service firm. We were talking about planning in our comprehensive plan. having our water and sewer infrastructure plan go hand in hand with that is vital. And since we're putting ourselves on a certain time frame in the next 12 to 14 months, it's something that makes sense for us to pull the trigger on if we feel comfortable with the right firm. Full service. Grants is a really key part of this, but one thing Mary Beth actually did not allude to, and maybe she didn't, I missed it, is they also have a lobbyist on retainer. So you just submit a grant, that's fine. It goes into the queue with a lot of other areas, but as someone who has a background in state government, you cannot undersell enough how important it is to have a lobbyist. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of falls into our agreement.
It does, and I'm glad you brought that up. So we've had a government relations firm with us from the very first day. Delaware's been around for about 30 years. I came there, the business partners who are with me now came there 20 years ago. For the last 20 years, we've had a government relations firm on staff. And when you hire us, you get them. And as Brian said, it's invaluable because I don't know what people's perception of lobbying is, but for us, it's raising awareness. It's like marketing. It's like making sure that the right person knows that the town of Montgomery is a place that the state should invest its money. Every one of these programs is competitive. All of these grant programs are competitive. You are competing against people in Buffalo and people in Plattsburgh and people in Lounge. And so there's always a question of where should the state spend its money? And so making sure that the message is a compelling message, that it's based on planning and facts, and that it gets to the right person who's ultimately going to make that decision is key. So that's what we use our government relations folks to do, is to make sure that we're getting that information in front of the person who's the decision maker. Not that people who go through applications and put them in giant piles aren't nice people, but they're not the ones making decisions. We want our application in the right pile at the top.
Correct. And go ahead, Bill.
We made 12 applications and we got 10 grants.
Yeah. And the ones we didn't get were strategic. We applied for 2 grants for a couple of communities, and we had previously worked out with the granting agencies. They do a thing where they all get together and they say, well, no double dipping allowed, right? You can't get 2 grants for the same thing. So we said, listen, we're going to apply for both. You guys decide which one you want to give us.
So what you're saying is
we don't care.
What you're saying is you were 100%. And those 2 were technicality. Okay.
Yeah, very strategic.
So the last part, obviously, is the institutional knowledge that comes with having Delaware, and the fact that Mike has been here for the last 30 years, not including his family, which is prior to that. And at any given time, I don't know, Sean, if you want to speak to this, there could be an issue where Mike's got the answer. And if for him to be available at a certain rate and not working somewhere else, and also having some sort of connection to the town still, can you speak to any sort of value that might have?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, even with Billy, our water sewer guy, I mean, between him and Mike, they know it might not be on the map where it says it is, but all of a sudden, the pipe's over here, but Billy knows and Mike knows that it's over here, but it's just shifted a little bit or something. I mean, it's knowledge you really can't replace.
Yeah. Questions from the board for Mary Beth and Delaware? We're going to get a lot of intimate conversations on next Tuesday for our walkthrough, or Mondays. Monday. So that will be kind of a work session for us to work through. But anything procedurally about the firm? Any questions at all? Yeah, go ahead.
So you had mentioned your hourly. How does that work for when you achieve grants? You do an hourly rate to apply for the grant, and then do you take a percentage off the top afterwards?
No percentages. No. So the way they work is, the way the typical thing is you guys are gonna say, we want to put the well that's over by the Bruderhof online, right? And we want to connect that all to the system and look at tanks and do this and do that. That's a project, right? That kind of is big money. It's a project. So what we would do is, under the hourly, we would sort of develop the scope of the project and some kind of a conceptual. And I know we kind of have one. We would sort of dust it off, fluff it up, make sure that it all makes sense. One of the things about grants is sometimes you have a need, and the grant agency says, well, that's great, but we have money for this. We don't have money for what you want, but we have money for this other thing. So sometimes we're saying, well, okay, in crafting the project, let's make sure we capture the thing that the grant's available for, and then we can bring along the rest of our project to get that same benefit, even though it's not maybe the primary focus of the grant, but we can bring it along. Water tanks are notoriously hard to fund. If we tie a water tank to some kind of treatment project or some other kind of project, we can fund it. So it's one of those kinds of things. Usually we do that work under that hourly where we just kind of come up with the concept and say, okay, here's the concept. Then we would convert that project when you say, okay, we want to go forward with this project. We want to go apply for grants. We want to get through the process. We would convert that into a project. So now it's got its own agreement, and embedded in that agreement, in the cost, and it's all lined out what we're doing, is that cost of preparing the grant application. But just so you know, the way we do this, we don't sell grant services separately. You cannot hire us to do a grant that's not associated with the project. And the reason is because we would not have that incredibly successful success rate if we did that. Right, we don't do the shotgun thing. It's gotta be part of the plan. So you'll not see a separate line item, say grant preparation. You might see, we're gonna prepare an engineering report, and that engineering report's gonna be the basis for the application, and we're gonna provide support to the town attorney for, say, maybe doing bond resolutions and seeker and those kinds of things associated with it, and all that stuff adds up to a grant application. But the reality is, the grant applications are online. You fill out a bunch of boxes and you push a button. That's not where the real effort and the real work is. It's really in the conceptual planning, putting together an engineering report, and then, as Brian very importantly brought up, making sure that the decision makers have your information and know why your project should be funded over someone else's.
Each grant application has to have an engineering report.
Right.
Makes sense.
Good, Chris? All right. Thank you guys very much. We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Eagerly
Monday.
learning. All right. Okay, for our public comment on business of the board, again, just to reiterate, this is specific to the discussion items. So old business, new business, it's meant for you to kind of give us any sort of feedback before we discuss and potentially make decisions on some of these items. Our second public comment is more general, so if you have any other statements or long things to say, please wait until that portion. But if you have something specific to these 8 items here on the agenda, please come up, state your name, and I would love to hear what you got. Yep, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Denise Doms. I'm here with my business partner, Annette Moore. I'd like to give the board members the perspective of a landhold owner that will be affected by the proposed moratorium. Annette and I own and operate an equestrian facility, thank you, own and operate a 158-acre equestrian facility known as Willow Hill Farm, located on Route 211 along the Wallkill River. 25 years ago, we took a leap of faith, sold everything we owned, moved from New Jersey, and encumbered ourselves with 2 enormous mortgages in order to realize our dream of establishing a high-end, full-service equestrian center, a facility where we could offer our neighbors a quality establishment, providing riding lessons for their children, a wonderful summer camp, and horse boarding opportunities. As a point of interest during this period of time, we have also given back to our community by raising and donating more than $200,000 to various animal rescue operations. When we purchased our farm, we were well aware of the industrial zoning of our farm and were informed by all of our advisors, including representatives from the town of Montgomery, our realtors, and our attorneys, that our property would appreciate exponentially in value once Neely Town Road was developed, as the natural expansion of growth would then extend to our farm on Route 211. At that time, we were provided with facts and figures of the values of industrially zoned properties in the area. Thus, we fully expected, anticipated, and planned on the appreciation and value of this land. The life of a farmer is one of never-ending long hours of physical labor, one which deals with not only extremes of weather, but risk of injury. Caring for livestock is a 24/7 responsibility. With this in mind, at some point in time, we must all acknowledge that we sadly may not be able to fulfill these ongoing responsibilities as we age. Furthermore, as is clearly evident, the farming industry in this area, especially dairy farming, has suffered severe financial setbacks, making the life of a farmer even harder to endure. The investment in our land is our pension fund, our 401k, as you will. to deny any farmer the opportunity to realize the appreciation of the land that he has so meticulously maintained and worked all his life is, to say the least, unfair, but more so, possibly even discriminatory, as a good part of the lands that will be affected by a proposed moratorium are large parcels that can accommodate large structures, ergo farms. This is almost tantamount to defunding our pension fund. The New York State budget deficit continues to grow. This will result in less municipal aid from the state. Practically speaking, it is ill-advised to reduce potential tax revenues that can be derived from industrial growth. This type of decision will result in higher property taxes for Montgomery residents, less services, and maybe both. It may even possibly cause more New Yorkers to flee the state due to even ever-increasing real estate taxes. Anyone who is in favor of a proposed moratorium possibly could have been aware of the zoning of the surrounding structures, properties, prior to purchasing their homes, or if they own property at the time of the adoption of the current comprehensive plan, that would have been the more appropriate time to voice their opposition, not 30 years later. Yes, we chose to live this life, but we also chose to purchase property that was zoned for industrial development that we knew would appreciate in value. We therefore feel that we must utilize every resource to protect our investment. While we appreciate a desire to preserve our bucolic landscape in Montgomery, we suggest that if the town of Montgomery sincerely wants to preserve these open spaces, please try to aggressively pursue a conservation policy of purchasing property development rights at the current fair market value of any lands that may be affected by this proposed moratorium. This solution can be offered to the landholders that are affected and possibly funded by the development of others. We feel this would be a fair compromise in which everyone would win. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for those comments, Ann.
Brian, I think our town has an Ag and Farmland Protection Board. If we could make them more active in looking at these parcels that might be interested, I mean.
This is all gonna be part of the next 12 to 14 months. It's all gonna be part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because there is extra funding, especially for the dairy farmers that you had mentioned. My sister and brother are both dairy farmers. So I understand the struggles that they're going through, and there is extra funding, or they are higher ranked in the Farmland Protection Fund in the state that the governor puts more and more money into every year. So.
And it's worth noting that we've done that in the past, and that PDR is something that we've done in the town of Montgomery more so than other communities throughout the county, so it's certainly something we're going to revisit.
I think we might still be second. We were first for quite a while, but we failed behind Warwick. Yeah.
So that's pretty, I mean, that's something that that's in our history, and that's something that certainly will be part of the conversation. Okay, next. Yes, Beverly.
Good evening. As a resident and a tax-paying citizen of this town, I want to make my opinion very clear. I am of the opinion that this board needs to call for a moratorium on all warehouses that have not, as of today, broken ground, started construction. The push by the projects to the planning board, whom you're supposed to protect, has caused them to be so overwhelmed that they've actually broken the law. On Monday, January 27th, at the town planning board meeting, Chairman Michael was so frustrated with an applicant, and they're not getting the required documents to them in timely fashion. They got their documents just 2 hours before the meeting. He called for a 5-minute recess, not going into executive session, not following protocol, but simply called for a 5-minute recess. They all left the area. They went out in the hallway and had private conversations. That was the entire board, the attorneys, the applicant, and the applicant's attorneys, away from the public. That's a violation of the open meetings law, clearly. And it is on video, It has been sent to the proper authorities, including Senator Skokas. There is also work going on, I don't know if you know it, at the Galaxy project down on Barron Road. That site's nowhere near approved. Endangered species are being left dead on the road. And there is video evidence of this as well. We have a building department and inspector that is so understaffed and overworked that these occurrences are soon going to become the norm instead of anomalies. There are documented instances where work on projects has progressed even without the proper documentation, AKA Alicia Holdings. But the building inspector just said, in effect, don't operate that until you get your building permit. That's illegal too. All of these acts are illegal, and you, board, have the power and authority to correct them. You can call for a moratorium on any and all warehouse projects that are not under construction as of today. Every one of you have a choice to make. Will it be one that follows the road to a legacy of decency and law-abiding government, or one that allows for a different outcome? Let me end with a quote from Robert Bolt. When a man takes an oath, he's holding his own self in his own hands, like water. And if he opens his fingers, then he need not hope to find himself again. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Nick?
Good evening. I'd like to applaud Denise on that well-articulated speech, and you know, I don't think that through this whole process that the board has heard a lot from landowners. I am also a large landowner, and I have conversations with several other farmers who are large landowners, and we all share that similar story and opinion. You know, as a large landowner, that is the most valuable asset that we have. And I've heard the comment several times that, you know, a majority of people, you know, want these pieces maybe preserved or not to be developed. But I would say that, you know, as a larger landowner and business owners, we are of course the majority. So our rights are to have that land, that value, and those zonings that we bought the property with. And as you know, Americans, we don't feel that anybody should be dictating to us, you know, the right to what we should be doing with our property. So that's all I have to say. But thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else? Yes, Barbara.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak. I hope that it has an impact on you. Realtors, developers, and economic development agencies all have the same mantra: location, location, location. There's no doubt that the town of Montgomery is an excellent location for massive warehouses. There are 2 exits that lead from the interstate directly into and through our town. However, this mantra also applies to every other industry. It's necessary to boost tourism so people will take this exit instead of going to the next. It's needed for retail, for both shoppers and for products. It's necessary to the clients and employees of professional offices and medical centers. And it's important to manufacturing, for delivery of raw material and for shipping of finished goods. The one difference all of these brick and mortar places have is the economic value. The value for an office complex, retail marketplace, lodging, gallery, or just about anything else is assessed at a greater amount per square foot than that of a warehouse. So the assessed property and school taxes return a higher amount per square foot. In other words, a smaller building with far less impact would return the same or greater amount in property and school tax. And for the most part, these industries also pay a living wage for the town, county, and region, while having a lesser negative impact and resulting cost to our natural resources. Our region is home to 4 of the most prestigious stage, scenery, and lighting houses, art and other fabricators, countless museums. We have wonderful parks and restaurants. All of these industries require good access to major roadways in order to succeed. There's a synergy that grows strong when similar industries band together. Polish Talix moved back into our building because of the synergy they share with Frank Stella. Artists seek out other artists for inspiration. Fabricators join with other fabricators. Professional offices, legal and accounting, architectural, engineering, and environmental services all succeed when their expertise grows with other related industries. Restaurants do better when they're closer to other restaurants. Retail markets become retail marketplaces. With lodging, this will also draw some of the $5 billion spent in the Hudson Valley every year directly to Montgomery. Even at just 5% of this amount of $5 billion, this is $12.5 million a year that would go directly into the local economy. This is a direct dollar impact, not a possible spinoff. It is real money spent, real sales tax and lodging tax collected, and every one of these industries relies on the services provided by the others. Imagine the added benefit if people took the exits from Montgomery off 84 or the Thruway to 84 instead of the ones for Newburgh and their waterfront, or New Windsor, or traveling north to Gardner, New Paltz, and Woodstock. When the first thing you see is warehousing, it leaves no desire to come and explore all of the wonderful things we have to offer. The next exit is only 10 minutes away. Warehousing offers none of the synergistic benefits. The spin-off benefits are largely for gas, coffee, and fast food. They are standalone entities unto themselves. They consume land with buildings that have a lower assessed value per square foot than other industries. They contribute to far greater constant noise, increased traffic, increased accidents, increased wear and tear on our roadways, decreased air quality. They increase impervious surface, often resulting in poor quality stormwater runoff that might even contaminate our water supply. The jobs offered are all too often below a livable wage, and a greater percentage of these employees will need the help of public assistance, which results in a direct cost to our county. We should not let realtors or economic development agencies be the arbiters for our future. Their interests are satisfying the needs of their clients. It doesn't matter that home values drop in areas around warehouses, or that these homes are often also the residents' greatest asset. The town's history and sense of community identity has no intrinsic value to them. These warehouse projects determine the permanent future identity of Montgomery. Implementing a comprehensive moratorium for warehousing only will ensure that we have a voice in our future. Allowing these projects to move to the approval stage is counterintuitive to the moratorium proposed by the town board. This will defeat the purpose of a new master plan and updated zoning that will guide the town of Montgomery toward the future. It is akin to closing the barn door after the horses have escaped to the pasture. The moratorium can allow for a case-by-case exemption. Infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, water supply, and enough personnel to monitor these projects must be in place before these projects are given the green light to move forward. Let the applicants apply for an exemption. Allow this process to proceed in a fair and orderly manner. It's time to stop and think about the future for the next generation, for our children and our grandchildren. This will be the legacy that you leave to the next generation. Will it be a place they can live and work, or will it offer them nothing but a memory of what used to be? It's time we replace the mantra of location, location, location with economic diversification, environmental preservation, and community unification. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, thank you all. We're gonna start with our first old business item, and this is our updated draft of our moratorium law. Did everyone get a chance to really get a good look at this? I know there was also an email sent over by Stephanie who actually laid out some of the items that we brought up, some of the concerns that we had in terms of length of agreement, in terms of geographical spotting of certain areas and exempting them, and some of the concerns they had, that Stephanie had there. Does anyone have any questions about some of those items that we brought up, or anything specific in the draft? Just to reiterate, we were drafting a 6-month moratorium, and this would have all warehouses and distribution facilities. Through our discussions, we have gotten past the 100,000 square foot threshold, and it includes all. Is that an area that you guys want to discuss?
Yeah, I think we need to revisit that.
Sure.
That's I think we need to revisit that a little bit, even if it's not 100,000 square foot, but maybe we can come up to some kind of agreement.
Is there a specific reason why you mentioned that?
Because if somebody just wants to build a small shop, say, and call it a warehouse, it's gonna be, like, if it's carried on with another business, you know.
So in part of this law, it speaks to add-ons. So what you're saying is if you had an existing business and they wanted to add on a 10,000 square foot, you know, retrofit something.
It would be called the warehouse, but maybe it's a storage place for them, or.
And as opposed to them going
like
through
that.
the exemption
Right.
process that we have in this law, you're saying we should change the threshold so that they don't go through that process and they're just exempt entirely.
Right.
Does anyone else agree with that?
Why would we change but isn't that why we have the process to ask them to say that they could do a waiver and show that it is creating hardship on their business, if that's what they mean by your storage that you're claiming?
Will, to clarify that point, is that
any applicant can come before the board, assuming the moratorium passes, at seeking a hardship exemption if they meet the criteria that's in here. Right now, the draft as it's written, non-final draft, but as it's written, it speaks to warehouses and distribution centers either as the primary or accessory use on a piece of property. So the board needs to decide, as Councilwoman Melick raised, the board needs to decide how they want to proceed, whether they want to consider that. If someone is storing for their own use, for their business, that doesn't necessarily qualify as a warehouse or a distribution center.
Right.
Because we have the definition of warehouse and definition of distribution center are in the law, the proposed law, the land use approvals, that's in there. Definition of warehouse tracks the current code section 30-20, which just happen to have here.
Yeah, but if they want to add on a couple garage doors or something for even their own warehouse use, or even if a new business is coming into the area and they want to put a small warehouse up affiliated with their, you know, business. I mean, I just think it's another loop that they would have to go through that they shouldn't have to go through. I mean, you know, we can put some kind of a size.
But we didn't want the size because isn't that what the planning board said?
So it wasn't necessarily just the planning board. I think it was, the basis of the conversation was at 100,000, right? And we identified during the planning process that there was, you know, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 square foot warehouses that potentially could be closer to residential areas, which is what the intent was. So what Sherry's saying is something entirely different. I think she's saying an existing business that maybe wants to warehouse some of their goods to be sold, is that what we intend to put a stop to? And I think what she's saying is that's not her intention, that's not something she would want to even have to go through the waiver process.
Right, to go through I mean, there's such a process they have to go through to begin with. Why would you need to put that extra process?
So I think what you're saying is you would wanna lower that threshold from 100,000 to maybe 50.
50.
And then that would help the little guys, is
As
what
an
you're saying.
accessory use.
As an accessory use.
Is that what you're referring to?
No, but even if they want to start a new business or whatever, I mean.
But that's
you know,
going,
like you're
that now you're changing it to, you're allowing a warehouse distribution center, which is what we need to take a break on for a little while and develop the plan, the comprehensive plan, and update the zoning to say, okay, if they wanna come in, great, let's welcome them, but let's try to steer them in a direction that we can welcome them and they can use our water and sewer and they can be in the correct place away from other areas, but we need to use time now to move forward on our comprehensive plan committee and look at the zoning.
What do you guys think?
I think we did start out, sorry, Ron.
No, go ahead.
We did start out at size, we did say 100,000, then it.
And then the planning board
ended up here, so.
Yeah, and I thought if somebody wanted to build a furniture store, and sell furniture, like they have in Hall there.
Yeah.
A 20,000 square foot furniture store which has showrooms and then you have a 10,000 square foot in the back where they have trucks dropping in and they have storage and they sell their product out of. That's new construction. Is that a warehouse? Now you said primary, the word you used, Will, I think was primary. Well, the primary purpose of that particular building is to have a furniture store.
Well, right now.
But you have 10 bins coming in the back and they drop off furniture or whatever they drop off and pick up and store it there. That's kind of like a warehouse. I don't think that should be part of this program.
That's up to the board. I mean, right now, accessory uses.
Will that come under, the way it's written, would that become under, we couldn't do that? They couldn't do that?
He just said yes, it's included.
Right.
It's included right
Yes.
now as an accessory uses as well. That's something the board needs to.
So I heard you make a comment, I just wanna be clear on it. You said we could potentially put a limit on accessory use at a certain threshold. Is that something that you said we could,
But not
as
the
an
primary
accessory,
use.
but
So
not
the
primary?
primary use of warehousing would be
Still under the
excluded
no
under
square
the-
footage, correct?
Right.
But this would be an accessory use, which is a point.
How about an accessory use to an existing business?
I mean, that's.
I don't agree with that.
I mean,
Suppose somebody
Well,
wants
wouldn't
to
that
do
be,
well, then
the same
that goes into what we're trying to do now. I
Well,
mean,
I
if it's a
don't
new
wanna make
business,
them
we
have to
need
go
to make
through
sure
that
that we have
extra
time to
work.
establish that the comprehensive plan is doing its job and the zoning is doing its job.
Well, it's gonna
If
be
we're gonna
able-
say
Hold on,
that
hold on,
existing
hold on.
businesses, they should be able to do business, and I can compromise with existing businesses getting a waiver on accessory storage.
What if it's a new furniture store? To speak of Ron's point, if you have a new store, they want retail, so the new store
real
is
quick,
coming in.
real quick, let's speak to the process we have in place. Can you go into a little bit better detail as to the exemption process and what it would take? Because we're talking about going through hoops. Can you explain what those hoops would
Could
be?
you make it a percentage, Will? Like the primary purpose of the store, the accessory warehouse can't be more than 25% of the primary use of that particular building? Is that something we can do?
25% in terms of square footage
Yes.
or percentage of the business?
I would say square footage of the building. That seems to be the problem.
That can be done.
Real quick, though.
Hardship, you wanna?
Yes, go ahead.
Does everybody have their copy?
Yeah, we got it in front of us.
If you'll go to section, current proposed section 7, that talks about the hardship. They would have to come before the town board, make a written application.
There's a process for them
There
to
is a process.
to state that they would like a business.
But
With all of everything else that they have to go through, I mean, I just don't feel they should have to go through this too for a small business, you know? Whether it be any business, a new or existing.
We have laws in place, such as the seeker process, to ensure that and I don't mean to get off topic, but if you're saying about the hoops that people have to jump through, We have laws in place to protect our residents, whether that's the adjacent residents, the residents down the road, but it's laws that our planning board has to follow by in our zoning board to make sure that developments get installed correctly.
Exactly.
So to me, it doesn't matter if that process takes 6 months or takes 2 years, they're doing their job.
So I think when it matters is when you get the reputation as a community that isn't friendly to business. And I think that's the point that they're trying to make to respect to what you just said. I think it matters. The length of time can absolutely matter because time is money. I mean, all those things, they matter.
Well, what's your definition of an extraordinary hardship? Who's gonna make that determination?
That's us. We do.
We decide what extraordinary hardship and what's regular hardship.
And that's why it's written like that. It gives us flexibility to make a decision based on a number of factors.
What we have in here is what it's not, which gives the board some more flexibility. What it's not is coming before the board and saying, well, I'm concerned that you're gonna change the zoning. That's not an extreme hardship. Looking at 7A.
Real quick, Will, can I give just a succinct example, right? So an extreme hardship could be, like you just said, a furniture store needs to stop its traveling and cut its costs, and it wants to invest in a space that it can just take its stuff and distribute it. That's a hardship. That would be a significant hardship. You could bring that to the board, and we could say, listen, this is not what we meant this in talk, not in our intent for this law to stop this business, so you can go through the planning process. And that this is a pretty, I mean.
Do we have to have a public hearing on that, or is it?
No, it's basically just, it has a timetable. We have up to 45 days up here, and then up to 5 days written notice.
There is a public hearing.
There is a public hearing?
Right, as it's written right now.
As written right now?
So the public hearing is gonna determine if it's an extraordinary hardship or just a regular
No,
hardship?
we would.
That would be part of the discussion.
Right, the public hearing is just for the public and for interested parties to have an opportunity to raise their concerns. We still make the determination. But we can choose not to have a public hearing as part of the exemption or the hardship policy. That's something we could remove.
Yeah, because ultimately the public hearing is just an option to hear the public's concerns about this said
Which we already do
hardship, but
every
we do,
meeting.
right.
So.
I mean, I'm not trying to limit it, but
No, but
if that's what the timetable is concerned about.
If the compromise is lessening the timetable and lessening what the hoop is, I think that's a good compromise. And I think in a moratorium law, the best place to hit, either it's a geographical issue, like issues on Town Road, or size, or an extension, the hardship clause is what we should clean up and go through that process. Go ahead.
I don't recommend taking out the public hearing component of it, shorten the time frame.
Okay.
But the point of, you can pass a moratorium on warehouses and distribution, and you have a hardship mechanism which you need to have to sustain the law. The point of it is, if there's going to be a hardship application, there needs to be notice to the public, shorten the time frame, get it done quickly, but taking out the public hearing component, I would not recommend.
So it doesn't have a time frame on the length of time it needs to be set forward. So you could set a public hearing. Is there a general law that says you have to set it after a certain number of days?
Public hearing,
10 days?
5 days.
5 days, right.
Right.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just real quick, is this typical hardship law that's written here? Is this what other moratoriums, like, is this just standard language that other moratoriums have that did not look at the other ones that you sent us?
Yeah, I mean, there's some variation in it, but it's generally what most of them look like.
Thank you.
All right, I'm hearing some concerns. Let's take a look at our hardship section 7, okay? We have the public hearing in here, but from how I'm reading it, we have a lot of flexibility in terms of getting the whole process done in a matter of even as soon as 10 days or 2 weeks. Am I reading that correctly, Will? Is that it goes up to 45 days, it could be extended longer, but we can also get it done quicker.
If the board wanted to push it, absolutely.
Right. So,
absolutely.
So Sherry, to your point, if you have a concern about this being an additional issue, instead of changing the law, we could go through the hardship process and it could be done within 2 weeks. So it's not.
It's just another step that they have to take.
I understand that.
Building a building when we could put a size on somebody that's a single business wanting to do small warehouse affiliated with a business that they gotta go through.
I'm not necessarily worried about the specific case. I'm worried about the unintended consequences that maybe I'm not thinking of right now that would allow for other opportunities to arise if we create a threshold. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Anybody else have an issue with the square footage or? Basically, my point is we have the hardship clause and it allows us an opportunity and the landowner an opportunity and the business an opportunity to plead their case in a really not insurmountable way, the way it's written, for us to allow them to just continue to go through the planning process. The way this is written seems fair to me. I don't know, I mean, that's just, it catches everything, in my opinion. Geography, the specific zone, every issue or concern we have, this seems to catch it. And we can always, you know, if we decide to set a public hearing and we hear some really good testimony from the public, we want to change it, we can always edit it after the fact if we get some more feedback and some good points brought in. So it's not like we have to make the final decision today, we're just shoring this up and hearing any last concerns.
Right, because wasn't that the point, that we were trying to clean it up so that way we could do a public hearing?
Yeah, we want to make this available to the public. They're eager to get it and provide their feedback. Well, I'm eager to get it to them.
Before we open the public hearing,
Yeah.
I think we should stick to our protocol and give this to our planning board for their opinions.
Before we have a final draft
Just in
form?
case we are missing something and they see something, we've always, before we open a public hearing, we always give them the opportunity to
Send their
give us their comments.
Did we though? Because
Yeah.
I thought that we had comments from Fred Michael.
So what we did is when Will was drafting the original law,
Okay.
they were brought into the conversation for that reason, to get ahead of it so that we could move, you know, efficiently. But they have not yet seen this version. And I think what Cindy is saying is before we set a public hearing, you'd want to actually have them have a discussion on this version. And then after we got their feedback at maybe the meeting in February, we would then set a public hearing for the meeting in March. Is that what you're suggesting?
I would say if we ask them to have their public comments back to us by our next meeting.
By the 20th of February.
We could still set that public hearing for March.
For March, right, which is 2 weeks difference.
Could we ask, because I think, don't they have a meeting on Monday?
Yes.
So if they have a meeting on Monday, wouldn't they be able to discuss it amongst themselves and get their comments to us if we have the open hearing at our next meeting?
We probably will have to call another special meeting to make the formal motion on the firm and on the committee anyway. So we may have another opportunity after Monday to make a motion to set a public hearing. So we'll have other opportunities, if that's your question, to do it earlier.
Can we ask them to review this at their next meeting to move the process along so that way we can discuss it at a special meeting next week?
I mean, we can do whatever we want, right?
We already have a special meeting set up for this week anyway.
Yeah, so-
We're gonna have a board meeting twice a week now?
So it's not a notice meeting, we can't take action at that meeting. So we can't take action there.
Thank you.
Well, that's what he's saying.
Right, but what I was saying earlier, and what we have not established yet, is at some point tonight, this evening, in executive session, we're gonna be making some final decisions on our comp plan committee and on our firm. And we had discussed internally setting a special meeting just for the purpose of making those appointments so that I could have time, a couple days' time to notify them, so they don't just find out on social media or from people who attended the meeting if we made a motion this evening. So we could also use that as an opportunity to say the planning board could have it done by next Thursday or whatever date it is that we do that. Or we can wait until the 20th. It's a couple of days difference, so it's up to you guys.
I mean, I'd like to give them to the 20th, if they have their comments back to us before the 20th, so that we can make a decision on the 20th for their public hearing.
And just to make a point, this isn't just coming from Councilwoman Boss, that the planning board did request this too. So that is something to consider. So it's, I think it's okay.
Can we just go back to, can we go back to a word specific again? Now, if you have a 20,000 square foot furniture store with 5,000 square feet of storage space for a warehouse, that's gonna come under this law?
At the moment.
I got a problem with that.
All right, but Ron, let me ask you this question.
I know they can go, see if it's a hardship.
In a matter of 3 weeks, they could just be back in the planning process.
Yeah.
Why should they have to go through that though?
I understand, but it's not insurmountable. It's very fairly written, the hardship clause, I think. It's not, I don't know, that's just my opinion. It covers everything.
If they're in the zoning for it to be done, they should be allowed to do it.
Well, that's the point of this, yeah.
That's why
So
we're
that's what we're talking about.
the
We either,
zoning and the comprehensive plan. That's exactly why we're doing it. That's why we're in this process.
the problem with identifying one hardship and not having them under the hardship section would be, that's just one. I mean, we're gonna run into 100, you know what I mean? Not really 100, but a lot. So we're either gonna do this or we're not, is what I would say.
I think that it should be like 50,000 square foot.
Okay.
That's a lot. You add a 50,000 square foot warehouse or accessory structure onto an existing building, how much impervious area are you looking at between all the parking spaces and all the rooftops and everything else? I would say I suggest we leave it how it is and send it to the planning board and see their comments. And then look for a public hearing shortly after.
So then, if we decide to change it on the 20th,
yeah,
can it still be done and then go to?
As long as we don't open the public hearing and make major changes after we've opened the public hearing.
So we can, to save.
Don't forget, this also has to be referred to Orange County Planning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to make, there's no seeker involved with a moratorium, but it has to go to Orange County Planning, and they have 30 days to get back to the town board.
So we can send this to the planning board for their comments and still have the flexibility to make the changes that you still might wanna make. So we don't necessarily have to make that decision tonight if we're going to send it to the planning board to get their feedback by the 20th. On the 20th, we could then make our decisions, final decisions before it's in draft form and we set our public hearing.
So, Will, I have a procedural question. I mean, we're gonna have the public hearing open. There's gonna be substantial comments from the public. After the public hearing is closed, can we then make changes prior to sending it to planning, or is that?
If there are substantial,
I'm sorry, I can't hear Will speaking. Go ahead.
Depending upon what happens at the public hearing and any other comments received, or comments from the county, or comments from the town planning board, if there are significant changes made to the draft that was the subject of the first public hearing, there would need to be a second public hearing.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know procedurally.
If they're minor changes, a word here or there, it's one thing, but if we're changing wholesale, some sections of it, that's gonna trigger the need for another public hearing.
All right. Another point that I wanna hit on is the time frame in the planning process that we would wanna identify in terms of what falls in to this moratorium law. So at what point during the planning process do we want to identify? That's something we discussed last time, but we didn't come to a consensus. It's a pretty big point.
I think that also should be answered somewhat by the planning board.
So you want to ask the planning board to provide their feedback on that issue as well? I'm comfortable with that as a starting point.
It's currently covered in section 5.
Correct. And we would want to see if the planning board thought that was an appropriate spot, or if there was other suggested recommendations they had. Do we want to give them our feedback if there's anything that's different, or is that something we want to ask them to give us some direction on?
Just ask their opinion. That's what we're asking them for on the other ones, right? See what they think, what they want to come back to us with.
Okay. Is there anything
I know
you wanna...
that I talked to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know that I spoke with Sue Haddon the other day, and she said she is getting more and more flooded with applications. So that will be a very, very important part as to where these projects are frozen in the queue, because a lot of developers now are knowing, everybody knows that we're looking at this and that we're trying to develop this. So I think if the planning board's stance on it would be a very important comment to me.
Okay. So unless there's any drastic changes we want to make before we send it to the planning board for their thoughts to give us their feedback by the 20th, do we want to move on, or are we still discussing some of these sections before we send it to the planning board for their comments?
According to this, the
Which section are you at, sir?
5.
Section 5 doesn't say much.
Yeah. They have to
Any
be,
warehouse or distribution center, that's all it says.
They have to have had their final approval, supposed to,
That's why,
February.
that's why I brought it up.
We would need to know that date.
Right, that's what I'm saying, this is the one section where I think we probably could provide some
So if
guidance.
they're like 3/4 of the way through now, they're done.
This is, the way this is worded, I don't think is acceptable, and I'm not quite sure that's where we stand. The point is, do we wanna give them some feedback, the planning board, by changing it now and sending them a newer draft? Or do we want to keep it as is and ask them to give us some guidance? I think that's the question. Because I do think this needs to be changed, I agree.
I agree.
So, do we wanna send it to the planning board, or do we
To
wanna
ask
give,
them at what point do they think that.
would they recommend to us?
Right.
And then we could either say, no, we disagree, or we agree.
Well, if I may, if the majority of this board at the moment feels that the language should be changed.
Yeah.
It would probably expedite things to.
Yeah, but they know better, like, how far into it.
Well, they'll know how many projects, right? They'll be able to more easily than us say, this will affect this many projects, and this will affect this many projects, and that certainly is.
There's secrets accepted and stuff, I think, you know.
That was part of the list that I gave you guys at the last meeting.
Yeah.
That stated where all the projects are that are in front of them up to a certain date. One of the town residents also put it together, and stated where they're at. So if we had that information, we could have made our own decision on that.
So do we ask them if the draft environmental impact statement is a good stopping point, or do we just leave it to them?
That's the whole point of this. We could give them, we could change this, we could give them guidance. If we had a consensus now, we could say, hey, this is where we feel it could go. What do you guys think? Or we could just give it to them and say, what do you recommend? And then have our conversation start there.
What is the law? What is the moratorium law? Well, is there special statements in there as to when the process would stop at all, or is that all subject to the town board's decision?
Town board's decision.
All right. So do you want to give any feedback to the planning board prior to us giving them this law in this section?
We want to ask them if the draft environmental impact statement would be a good stopping point. What's their opinion?
The exception of that, right?
So you're saying to ask the planning board if they think any project that has submitted their draft environmental impact statement is a good starting point, because that's what you're asking.
Submitted or.
I'm asking.
Or accepted.
Comes to doing business.
I'm asking you guys.
Let's ask them.
Ask the planning board.
I think it's.
All right.
It's important.
We're gonna punt that for this meeting. We will get the feedback from our planning board, and by the 20th, we'll also be able to determine, based on their feedback, how many businesses that would affect and how many developments that would affect anyway, and what that impact would be. All right? Anything else before we move on? Will? Yeah.
They're gonna give us our feedback, and then, we gotta value what their feedback is.
Correct.
And just a point of clarification, DEIS is only on POSDEC projects.
Right, it'd be
projects where there's a positive declaration of an environmental impact. So I think that also needs to be discussed, because it could be on projects that are negatively declared.
Correct.
That's still absolutely an issue.
Correct. And those that get an EAF, I agree. All that needs to get figured out, which is why I think the planning board feedback will be important. Yeah.
So, before we move on, just so I'm clear, so the latest version, the red line that we sent last week, I'm gonna just have that document clean, accept those changes, or any of the other changes that we made, anything needs to be discussed, or all those good?
No, the changes you made look good.
So-
Does anyone have any issues with the current version, sending it to the planning board, is what he's asking?
After I clean, accept all the changes in the document and send it over to the planning board?
Correct.
Okay.
And so for the public's knowledge, that would get us on potentially to a point by the 20th to potentially set a public hearing and have this document available for more feedback.
And I appreciated the red line changes, by the way.
Yeah.
I liked the procedurally how that was done, because now I can see where the changes were made.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job, Will.
Alright, so, I got it.
Okay. Thank you for our friends from the Walden Savings Bank for being patient. We're gonna move on to our potential zoning change of Ned Law property. This is something that, just for everybody's knowledge, was petitioned last year or earlier. So this is something that the town really kind of talked to Walden Savings Bank about this and made recommendations. So not necessarily this board, but previous board asked them to consider this as a zoning change. So I would love to hear from you guys there. Derek Wanku.
Brian,
yes.
before they start.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Abstain from this process.
Cindy is an employee of Walden Savings Bank, so she's going to abstain from the conversation. Yeah.
Mr. Supervisor, I will note for the record in public that I do some work for Walden Savings Bank in their commercial loan department.
Okay.
So we will need to discuss that as a board, how we're going to proceed with that, whether there's going to be any issue with it. There are other applicants involved here, but I know the primary applicant is Walden, so.
Thank you for disclosing that. What type of work
I'm
is
not
it?
general counsel to the bank.
Okay, I was just going to ask.
No, I'm not general counsel to the
It's
bank.
more just.
I work with their commercial loan department.
Okay.
On various projects.
Okay. Thank you for disclosing that, Will.
Okay.
Go ahead, Derek.
Hello, Derek Wanku, President and CEO of Walden Savings Bank, and also, I believe on the agenda, it's NedLaw Corporation that actually has filed a petition for zoning change. A little fun fact, NedLaw is Walden spelled backwards, and in 1986, when the bank acquired the property at Scott's Corners, we did it in the name of NedLaw. So I'm also the CEO of NedLaw. I'm also accompanied by the chairman of NedLaw, Jeffrey Christ, who has also been on NedLaw and the bank's board for 27 years. So a little bit of level setting before I get to our specific requests. Again, the bank in the name of NedLaw acquired approximately 35 acres of property around 1986 at Scott's Corners. The zoning at the time was OP, Office Park, when acquired. Our bank had our headquarters in the village of Walden for 124 years and felt being around Scott's Corners, closer to the 84 corridor, closer to all the anticipated growth at I-84 made a lot of sense. Then, fast forward to 2002, that is exactly what we did. We built our headquarters there, we built our branch. There is a law office of our primary law firm, Johnson and Foley and Sirigliano, there, over 80 people, and we've been there for 18 years. Also around the time when we started the construction of the headquarters in 2002, in 3 time frame, we also provided some acreage to the Chamber of Commerce of Orange County, and they sit in the building behind us to about 2 years ago, where now the Girl Scouts Heart of the Hudson Valley are there. We also, just last bit of level setting here, about 6 years ago, the section around Old 208 that Don Whitfield owned, we acquired about 1 acre to 2 acres of property there. We thought that if a potential buyer saw that there was maybe another way to get into Scott's Corners from behind, that would be something that would be a benefit to future sale. We also helped remedy a very awkward angle. Old 208 came out at an awkward angle, and we fixed a site impediment there. So what is left today, after we took about 8 acres of the campus, is about 25 acres behind us. And it is still that initial zoning that we had back in 1986 of OP. That is what we still have today. And we all know what's happened with office parks over the past 10 to 15 years. Folks are telecommuting, industry is going digital, and the need for offices is greatly diminished. This is not just a local demographic happening here in the town of Montgomery, it's happening everywhere. NedLaw, or Walden Savings Bank, in our petition feels the B4 zoning provides us with more opportunity to market our property and provide the town with attractive future rateables. We've been carrying it for nearly 35 years and have no reasonable offers despite listing it consistently over these last 35 years. We've consistently lowered the price, and currently it's listed at really what just our cost basis is. Furthermore, our bank regulators, the Office of Comptroller of Currency, don't look favorably upon banks simply holding property for future development. We're not in the development business, so they are also wanting us to try to actively market the property. So this potential use of B4, a lot of people ask me, well, what more is allowed? And I'll give you just 2 examples. Perhaps a catering hall up at the top of the hill. If you haven't been on the property, is the absolutely, maybe prejudiced, most beautiful piece of property in the town of Montgomery. You can see the Shawangha Mountains, you can see Mount Beacon, you can see Warwick, you can see Winding Hills. It's absolutely beautiful. How wonderful would a place like an Anthony's, Villa Venezia, Spruce Lodge, none of them have approached me, but again, that type of facility would be amazing. or say a medical facility like a Cornerstone or a New Horizons, Walkie Valley Health Center, Crystal Run. So the B4 zoning has more options, and again, the kind of very restrictive OP zoning is just really, we've gone nowhere fast these last 35 years. And again, if granted, we, Walden Savings Bank, we have nearly 150-year brand. We are going to be very stringent in who we sell the property to. We want it to be a use that is conducive to our brand and the bank position that we've had for almost 150 years in this community. So in conclusion, we humbly ask that you consider our petition to extend the B4 district to our property. And if I didn't also say this, probably the most important point, all the properties around us are B4. This is not spot zoning, just doing this for Walden Savings Bank and Ned Law. You can look at a zoning map, everything around us is B4. We just happen to get OP, and OP is going nowhere fast. So B4 will provide for orderly development of the property consistent with the existing and allowable uses of property around us, and also allow the town to recognize future ratables. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Derek. And just so you know, that last point is a big reason why this was even put on the agenda, as opposed to holding off or waiting and having it be part of the whole comprehensive plan process, is that it isn't spot zoning. It's very specific. It's putting it in line to other B4 locations which are neighboring that zone. And also, this is an important piece that's on this that I'll put in here. Office parks are still permitted in B4, so although this is going to be changed, every single use from where it's being changed for is still included in B4. So while the district is eliminated, the use is not. And that's something that I think is important. So what we're doing here is recognizing that long-standing institution in the community, Walden Savings Bank, who desperately wants to see a positive development, this gives them a little more flexibility to give them options to develop that property. So I think we can separate this, in my opinion, which is why we brought it to the board. And they've been waiting quite a long time. It's not their fault that
years.
You know, the transition has been made the way it is. So wanted to get your guys' feedback.
Somebody else have a question besides me?
I think we all took a walk.
Yeah, we all did a walk through.
It's more, I've lived in Montgomery for 45 years. It's like, I never knew it was there, believe it or not.
Me neither.
Went to the top of there. It's the most gorgeous piece of property in the town of Montgomery. And I've been through all the parks. It would be great for, and I'm looking at these additional uses for B4, and as long as we don't put any warehouses up there.
You don't want a warehouse.
So any of these things in the B4 need a SEU permit also? Like, is that what?
A special use permit?
Yeah.
I mean,
Is that
any.
what that is? It's on the end of every single one of them?
Does that mean right now it would need a special use? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if that's what's in B4 uses, I mean, every single one says.
As far as I know, they would need a special permit, because they're
So
permitted.
what's permitted there without a special?
Well, it says it right there. If it doesn't have the ESCU, that's would be permitted there without a special use permit. So there's a few. It doesn't have one at the end. So like this right here wouldn't need a special use, right? There's certain ones on there that wouldn't need.
Right.
There's very few, right? But the point is they couldn't have a chance if it wasn't zoned differently.
Just so the public is aware, we were given a list of some of the B4 uses. So, hospital, schools, fire stations, public library, museums, nursery schools. There's a lot of really good, excellent uses here, like animal hospital, banking, bowling alley, which I like. Hotel.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Kristen.
When did the banking regulations change, or did they, that would say that they don't want banks to actively
They've
market
always
property?
been there. That's just a banking kind of standard about banks really aren't in the business of holding onto property that they're not developing for the purpose of a branch. When we take property back as REO, a foreclosure, they want us to move it, so it goes the same with our property. It hasn't changed, and every time I have a regulatory exam, I show the momentum of what we've been doing over the 35 years. One of the people that has it currently listed, we've changed agents. When I said, oh, it's not moving because maybe we had the wrong real estate agents, we've lowered the price from 2.5 to 999. Just finished an exam this week, and I had to show all this activity, that we're trying, we've tried to show it, so we're not in the doghouse because we are showing forward motion. They see all the efforts we've tried to do to actively sell it. We just have had absolutely no movement because it's OP. So
why the movement now to change it when we're in the middle of looking at our comprehensive plan?
This isn't, this is not new. This goes back before me. I've been the president for 9 years. Our board has been trying this for years. We've lowered the prices. We've talked to the brooder.
You tried changing the zoning?
Not this particular.
So last year, this was submitted last year. That's the whole point.
Last spring.
Right, in fairness to them, it's not something that was brought up
In fairness
recently.
to them, it was submitted by them and never brought to the board.
Correct.
Yeah, the other, just for this grid that you have, the SP just stands for site plan, those are permitted uses.
The SEU is.
SEU is the special use permit.
Right.
Basically, a special use permit. Things on here in the B4 that are permitted uses, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
The bowling alley, office, and personal service shops like barber shops, beauty parlors, professional studios, repair shops for appliances. You can put a restaurant there just as long as you have an approved site plan, it's a permitted use. A tavern, vocational school, anything you see on here with an SP is a permitted use within that zone. Anything that's got the SEU, it needs a special use permit.
Right.
But it's.
Are you marketing it as one piece, or are you going
Currently,
to
it's
subdivide it?
currently there's about 25 acres. That's one piece at 999,000, and then there's 2 acres right at the very bottom. We want to keep, we want to keep the very front forever green because it just shows the beautiful monument sign in the bank, and our board wants to keep that. And I have something right at the corner, but a little further down 208, there is another separate lot.
All right, thank you. I was just gonna ask Will something, but he walked out. Hey, Will. Yep. Before I ask Will that question.
I just had a quick question for engineer. Sorry.
All right, no problem. So my question is, if we wanted to move forward, what would we do? Just set a public hearing for potential?
Again, we will need to schedule a public hearing. Town board would declare itself the agency for secret purposes, and would have to get referred to the county under 239M,
right.
the county planning department, and we'd also want to have the town planning board have a look at it as well.
Right.
So if you want to move forward with that, the board can discuss that.
Okay. Would anyone like to make that motion?
Your meeting's in March.
Yes, the first Thursday in March.
So that would be the public hearing?
Does that give you
enough time?
We got to get it to the county.
for
That's
30 days?
30 days.
So your meetings in March are March 5th and March 19th.
Oh, so because it's 28 days in February, you're right. 29?
Yeah.
Sleep year.
So that's just under 30 days.
Well, you can schedule the public hearing, and it's entirely possible that the
You
county
don't have to.
Ah, right. We'll get it back in time.
We, do the county. So it's up to the board.
All right. So what would the motion be so that our clerk could have it?
Has the applicant submitted an EAF on this?
I think so. I think I have a copy of them.
Did you not get it?
I have one for the water and sewer portion. I don't know if I have one
For the zoning?
it may be, Tara, do you have it?
Do you want it?
I have what
For
you
the
need.
zoning?
I think so.
I may have, because that has to also go to the county.
It's not, there's more papers behind it, but change of zoning for tax max parcels.
Got it, Will?
Okay, so we've got a full EAF. Yeah. Well, no, I'm just,
Okay.
I just wanna make sure it's.
Thank you for standing.
Oh, you have to still stand, or?
Does anyone have any more questions for Derek? Okay, thank you.
Alright, you got an EAF here, so you can go ahead and schedule a public hearing.
All right, would anyone like to make that motion?
Second meeting in March?
No, this would be for March 5th,
First
Thursday,
meeting?
March 5th, at 7 p.m. That's on the 20th. That's the 20th, February.
Okay, just make sure it was the
Yeah,
same night.
I'm on it.
Okay, so.
I'll second that.
Who made the motion?
Ron.
Hold on,
Ron,
hold on. We
okay.
have to, within the motion.
Yeah.
There has to be a few things on a set of public hearing.
You got this.
Number one, the town board needs to deem the change of zone application complete, including the EAF, which Councilwoman Brown just provided, so we have it, and the town board can review it. Number two, the town board has to declare itself as lead agency for secret purposes and classify the action. How many acres is this?
35, I think.
Derek, what was the acres?
25.
25?
25, 26, yeah.
Okay, so preliminarily classify the action as a type 1 action under part 617 of the seeker regulations. What?
I don't know that this is complete, I didn't.
We only do part 1.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna say, there are a whole lot of answers. After D, these are not answered.
Yes, on that form, if the project is of a certain nature, you skip a bunch of questions in part 1. I'll go through it and make sure that
I
it's.
think I would be a little nervous to
Yeah,
say that it's
before we-
deemed complete until you look
Well,
through it and make sure that it is complete.
I actually did look at this. I was looking, I had 2 AAFs from them. One was the water extension. This one I do have. And there may be a couple of boxes that need to be changed when I was looking at this, because one of the boxes, it said the town board was the only agency. I believe on that one that you have, the county has to sign off on this too and look at it. So what have I said so far?
Well, you said that it was deemed complete, and I don't know that it is deemed
The form has
complete.
been submitted. Whether the
Okay.
town board wants to make changes to the form, that's a separate issue, which we would do before the public hearing and before we did some other things. What do I have so far? Sorry.
The zoning application is complete, namely the EAF is deemed complete. 2, the town board has to declare itself lead agency for secret purposes, and it's classified as a type 1 action under secret regulations.
Those are all one.
That's one motion, yeah, it's got a lot of
Yeah,
things in
we
one
can do
motion.
it all in one motion.
Oh, yeah, and set the public hearing for March 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Or as soon thereafter.
And refer the application and the EAF to the Orange County Planning Department pursuant to General Municipal Law 239M for their review and comment to, what?
No, we're just making comments, keep going, Will, we're good, we're good.
And to, pursuant to seeker, send out lead agency declaration notice to all interested and involved agencies. And post in the environmental notice bulletin. I think that'll cover it for now.
Thank you, Will. Do we throw in upon complete?
And also, refer to town planning board as well.
Okay. Upon final review by attorney? That,
Fine.
okay, we'll put that in there too.
Keeping in mind whether that's gonna be me or somebody else based on my,
Understood.
representation in certain aspects of the housing spaces.
Understood.
And the clerk is directed to publish all the appropriate notices.
All right.
That's the motion.
Ron, would you now like to make that motion?
Can you go over that motion?
Stop.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One recusal? Or she's not, yeah. Abstain? Yeah. All right, motion passed. Councilwoman, come on in. Mike, thank you for being so patient. Can you please provide us with an update on the wastewater treatment plant? If we all remember, we had an emergency allocation a couple meetings ago. I gave a brief update that the work was being done, I believe, the day of the last meeting. Mike, can you give us a continued update, please?
On the inflow infiltration monitoring?
Yes.
As our luck would have it, the Jam Enterprises, the video inspection contractor, got out there within a couple days after getting authorization, and that's right when inflow infiltration subsided. So we did, the camera work indicated potential sources of inflow infiltration. There was nothing that was earth-shattering. And they recommended, rather than spend more of the town's money and another day out there, going further to wait until we, maybe the spring melt, if we ever have any snow, but typically when we get some heavy rains, usually in March and April, schedule in advance to come out and finish the work. We conservatively allocated more than a day's worth of camera work, so the suggestion and recommendation by Tam so that we have something to show for it will be maybe, as long as the allocation to the board may still stands, we'll monitor the weather in the coming month and a half and have them come out when the metering shows Impulse INI has gone up, and it looks like we're going to have some heavy precipitation, which should show something. So
if I'm understanding this correctly, because we had inflow and infiltration issues, but our process didn't allow us to answer it immediately, to do the imaging, to catch it while we had our issue, we didn't really potentially see what could be the problem. So what you're suggesting is that we leave that authorization and the allocation that we made true, so that if it comes, you can respond in real time and find out what the problem is?
Yes.
Where's our wastewater treatment plant at? Like, where is the, are we over
capacity?
Yes.
Year to date, being January 1st, we're probably right at capacity. For 2019, you look at your annual average daily flow, so the most recently completed calendar year, 2019, which is actually that report, that annual report that I just prepared for Brian, he has to sign, and we submit to DEC. Flow at the treatment plant was just under 130,000 gallons a day.
All right.
That included the heavy INI we had early in the year, the subsiding of the INI after we made the fix, and then it flared up again. Something popped up again in mid-October, November. We made the fix, it went down to about 110,000 gallons a day, but when you look at the entire year, with extraneous flows for 19, the average annual daily was, for all intents and purposes, 130.
What's our permitted use?
147.5.
So this is definitely going to help us in our application in terms of grant funding to make sure we upgrade our wastewater treatment plant. Thank you, Mike.
You got it.
All right. Moving on to Ambulance Corps Task Force update. So Sherry Mellick, Councilwoman Mellick, and I have been part of a task force that included members of the Town of Montgomery Volunteer Ambulance Corps, also Mike McNamee, who we were introduced to at our reorganization meeting, which is formerly of the Ambulance Corps, but also is part of the industry and is a Town of Montgomery resident who showed concerns and had some time available to help as well. Tom Waddell is on this task force. He is with RBT CPAs. He's an individual who helps with accounting of not just our Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps, but ambulance corps throughout the entire Hudson Valley region. We've been trying to also find a representative of Mobile Life, who we work with currently. I just want to give a quick overview. So a lot of us as board members, I know, and I thank you guys for really educating yourselves as well as I am on the facts and the definitions and what's going on. So just to give a quick synopsis to the public that are here and all of you, this really comes down to an issue of funding on a variety of levels. Part of it is the market in terms of the industry and how it is that we can get qualified individuals interested in earning maybe not a great wage, but providing the services for ambulance corps that we need to have provided. The lack of interested individuals and availability for that industry is definitely hurting ambulance corps, not just here in the town of Montgomery, but all over the state of New York. And because of that, and because of the shortage of volunteers, a lot of ambulance corps are shifting to paid employees because they just can't get the number of volunteers. Because of all these things and so many more, there's some deficits. A big issue that I need everyone to just make sure we understand, I believe you all do, is right now our Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps does not have the ability to respond to ALS, and that's Advanced Life Support Services. That's the serious cases. Right now, Mobile Life responds to those, and we respond to those as well. But that's a big portion of the revenue that our Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps does not receive, that if they had the ability to respond to those and they had the credentials, they would be able to. That is a long-term sustainable fix that I believe will help us maximize the amount of services we can provide from ambulance in the town of Montgomery, but also from a business standpoint, as a Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps nonprofit, once they get to that threshold and can apply and serve the ALS need, they'll be able to become potentially more revenue neutral. So a lot of the financial shortfalls that you've seen on these bills that you're seeing that aren't able to get paid, I want to make very clear, it's not strictly a mismanagement issue. It's not a lack of getting the resources to the right places. It's just the natural dynamic that exists, not just in the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps, but ambulance corps throughout the entire state. And it's Medicare, it's Medicaid, it's a time that it takes for payments to get through to our ambulance corps, and cash flow issues they have for that reason. But the big piece for the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps is the revenue they miss out on and not being able to I don't want to say cash out, but really create revenue off of those ALS responses. I'm going to let the representatives who are here speak to it a little bit. I'll ask you guys to come up, the Charettes and Diane, if there's any questions, and anyone else who's here. But I just want to get to some of the specific requests that were being made. Obviously, we've budgeted a certain number in our budget to respond to ambulance services within the Town of Montgomery. And the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps is the chief organization that is responding and taking care of that need for us. So we've been trying to paint a very long-term picture, but while we're painting that picture and coming up with sustainable solutions, the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps has really done a good job showing us all of their financial needs and how close to home this is for them. You should all have in front of you about $40,468.89 worth of bills that does not include payroll that are past due. And right now, you'll also see, and Diane, correct me if you have the updated bank statements.
I don't have them with me.
Do you have the number as of February 1st? Because these were of December 31st you had.
In regards to what? How much we have
How much
in
money
the
you had
account?
in your account, correct?
Probably about $3,500
In which account? I know there were two.
with our checking account, and the other account just covers our payroll.
Correct. So at the end of December 31st, they had, I think it was about 10K total, if my numbers were correct. And you guys have paid out your payroll for the month of January. Is that correct? So you have money coming in, but the money you have coming in, based on the services you're providing, is covering payroll. You guys have had to shift in order to cover the services and to save people's lives to paying full-time employees.
Right.
And because of that cost, you have to have that revenue that comes in pay for that payroll, and there's a lot of bills that are here that just you don't have the ability to pay based on the financial statements you've given us, and you have laid out every single one of these specifically, what the amounts are, what's getting paid. We have them all here. So,
And correct me if I'm wrong, if Mobile Life does come, you pay them.
We pay them $365 for every Medicare
Medicare only.
call.
correct. And if
Because they can't both bill. So if both of them show up, they can't both bill. So now they are paying Mobile Life to come to a scene.
They can, hold on, sorry. So, to touch on that, we both can bill. Medicare only pays the transporting agency.
Right.
So if they pay us, then that person who has Medicare gets stuck with the $1,000, $1,100 Mobile Life bill, whatever it may be, whatever was done. That's what happened. The reason we did the agreement with them was so the tax, people in the town wouldn't get stuck with that bill. So really it was done, I mean, I guess if you want to say, the take one for the team, like we basically did that so the taxpayers wouldn't get hurt with that bill, because it's a lot, especially because it's mostly elderly. If you're on Medicare, it's you're 65 and over, and their fixed incomes as it is. So basically we did it, we laid on the sword basically so they wouldn't get those bills. I mean, we only get a little bit from it, but it also doesn't hurt them.
No, I agree. Is there something else you had? Sorry.
No.
So another component of this is calls of service. So I think it was 2,300 calls of service a year, something around that.
22, yeah.
2,200 calls for service. So a big portion of this is how many the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps responds to, how many does Mobile Life respond to, and that really will allow us to project out, which is what we're trying to do now, along with our representatives of the task force, to figure out what that number is that they won't be able to cover in terms of just general services, not even the extra stuff, not even the maintenance of the buildings that they're in and all those things. So what my point is in terms of regurgitating all this information is we are on this issue. We are taking a really hard look at it. We know it's not going to be solved overnight, but I am proud to say that although we had a couple of rocky conversations, the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps and the group that we're putting together is working together in good faith, and I think they're showing this today by all the documents they're giving us, that we're really on board to figure this out together. And a big portion of it is going to be getting them to being able to provide ALS services, which I imagine is what you guys want to eventually get to do. So a big portion of why they can't do that is funding. There's a lot of costs that are associated with applying for being able to respond to ALS services. And that number is over $300,000. So we're going to get creative. We already have some interested potential private partners that are going to help out. So this is not just all on the expense of taxpayers. And that's another very important point. While we're going to consider a request for them today to pay off some of these expenses, not every one of these solutions that are financial issues is going to come from Town of Montgomery taxpayer money. There's plenty of people that are already offering to help offset some of these costs long term. Do you guys want to speak on anything else that came up in the conversations that you'd like the board to know before we consider the request?
So right now, really the only issue is because it's now January and now February, we don't receive, and since our patient demographics are very Medicare, Medicaid enriched, well over 60%, I think 65% Medicare, Medicaid patient demographics, which obviously, it's very detrimental. Most other districts might not have the same. Some might be close. Some have really good demographics, so they get a better return. But January, February, we don't receive any money for Medicare, Medicaid. They're shut down for pay. They're doing their IRS stuff. They're doing all their.
No, it's an important point.
So and henceforth, why obviously the money, you don't see the money numbers even close to where it should be.
Right.
As well. And don't forget about the government. Now the governor again trying
I can speak to that. So the governor's trying to take care of his budget deficit right now, and in his executive proposed budget, which is not finalized yet, he is looking to potentially make some significant cuts. And we've seen, based on hearings and statements made previously on bills that were put in there, that he's looking to specifically take away and undercut some of our ambulance corps' resources. So that is something that could be coming down the pipeline. Okay. Do you guys have any questions before I get into a couple more details?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Ron.
On that $40,468, does that include the $7,200 that is going to be due to the town, plus I assume another $3,600 for the last half of last year for rent?
No.
That does not include that?
No.
We took it out.
So we have two separate letters here, and I'm glad I rushed over this a little bit. So the two requests that we have here, the first one is to help offset the cost of the $40,468.89 of all of these bills that were itemized that you guys have in front of you. The second request is, since we're having discussions as a task force and we're talking about the town potentially providing money to the ambulance corps, it doesn't really make sense that we're collecting rent, right? So the second request would be from 2019, and I talked to Bernard about this, and in terms of our audit, and if we're basically would be forgiving them for not paying $3,600 in 2019 for that last quarter rent. That's part of the request. So their request is the $40,468.89. The last quarter of 19 and the first quarter. No.
Not a quarter, Brian. We paid them.
Half. Sorry, I said quarter half. Sorry about that. And then we're looking at 2020.
Well, half a year.
Yeah.
Now, is that included in our revenue budget as proposed revenue that we thought we were going to
Absolutely.
get? Or do we take it out?
No, it's absolutely. So you could either do a couple things, right? We could put that in our total 100,000 number, or we could eventually get to a point in the process where we go past that, and if we want to do a budget transfer. But we would not be going, we would be able to account for that, if that's your question, because we budgeted $100,000. So if that took at our revenue in that line, we have wiggle room in the $100,000 we've appropriated.
Okay.
So all of these things we can do.
One question relating to last year's budget, since we didn't get revenue the last 6 months, right?
$3,600.
Well, why would we assume that we're getting revenue this year when we were going through the budget?
Well, because it's.
We didn't even know.
I don't want to throw people under the bus, okay? But there's a reason why they did not pay, and it's because there was a communication given to them that I have no knowledge of.
Certainly not throwing them under the bus.
I understand that.
I'm asking, if we did not receive revenue for 6 months, why would we project
That was
getting
never
revenue
brought
this
to the
year?
board.
Okay, to Ron's point, it's the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps, to answer your question, has given rent to the town.
Right.
Every 6 months.
Except for that last payment, because there was a communication that took place that told them not to.
So it's not a monthly payment? It's
Oh, right.
Half,
Right.
every 6 months.
Yes. Pay twice a year.
Okay,
Right.
got it.
So it's not as
Actually,
though.
they were told not to pay.
Right, so it's not as though they stiffed us, they were
I'm not
told
talking
not to
about
pay.
that. I'm talking about
I just wanna make it
the
clear, Alright. Right?
So,
All right.
Brian,
Yes.
I know we talked about this when Eric was up here. How is the contract between the two agencies for us to be able to transfer the money? Is that all set?
No, this would happen, with the knowledge that there's going to be a contract put in place that would be prorated to January 1st, 2020.
Yeah, the contract, the numbers that are in the contract are not, the ask that was from the company is, we're not, the town's not ready to commit that kind of money. So that's why there was the stopgap of the 100,000 put in the budget.
Right.
And that's where this money, for tonight's, bill situation is coming out.
Right.
But we're not at the point where we do the contract yet.
Now, if we did draw up a contract, I imagine all of this would be a part of that.
Well, yeah, whatever, the contract is going to, it's going to consider the monies that have been essentially advanced from the allocated funds in the budget.
Right.
So they're gonna be accounted for.
Right.
Absolutely.
Do you need a motion for this?
So there's a couple of things at play. The first one is the $40,468.89. And before I make a motion, I want to have any questions you guys have on all those itemized bills, and thank you for itemizing them because they are here. So if you say, oh, what's this about? They're here. They can answer that. I've already asked and answered my questions.
We both have.
So if you guys have a question, I just want to allow you the opportunity to ask them. They've been very forthcoming.
Can I just ask what we owe the Village of Maybrook for?
Gasoline. Fuel.
Yes.
Fuel.
Which is
Which is-
another thing we need to really talk about.
We have that as part of our discussions too, on ways we can help them with that to avoid that cost in the future. That will be for a later meeting.
They purchase gas for Maybrook.
DiMartino Motorsports.
That's the repairs.
Isn't that your ambulance
ambulance
repairs?
repairs, yeah.
Oh,
Plumbing and heating, it's not for this building down here, I hope.
No, as far as.
Yeah, we don't get, no, we.
No, yeah.
No.
Nothing for that
There's
building.
we don't have any plumbing in that building for us.
Yeah, no plumbing.
The only thing in that bay is just a bay with lights and a heater. That's it.
So this is for the building involved in this
Well,
plumbing and
correct.
heating.
Yeah.
What is,
Yeah,
what is
right.
PAB stand for?
That's professional ambulance billing. That's the billing company that bills out our stuff to the patients.
And MLSS?
It's Mobile Life. That's for
the
Medicare.
money you pay them for.
Yeah, for Medicare. Yeah.
Now look, if you look at those mobile life bills and look at the amounts, that's when we get to the ALS services, that's
You don't need to pay that.
that's not even just an expense, but it's also a
Yeah.
revenue. So you hit it
Exactly.
on both
Yeah.
ends.
15,000.
Right, they're big.
It's very costly.
Yeah. And also, in terms of case studies, I know I mentioned this, but as part of the task force, hey Ron, real quick, I just want to hit this point. This isn't the first time this has been established. Other ambulance corps have worked with Mobile Life, who had been providing the ALS services, and weaned off of those services and invested slowly but surely, and over a period of time, I believe the town of Newburgh has gotten to the point, and they followed suit of what the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps did in terms of shifting to paid employees, but they were a little more advanced in the sense that when they brought Mobile Life to the table, they had this conversation we're having now to say, we want to get to ALS. What the Ambulance Corps hopefully will find in us is a partner that will help them creatively figure out the expenses it takes to be able to provide the ALS services.
On that subject.
What'd you say?
Newburgh's not going ALS.
Newburgh will never go out.
I just talked to the chief, and he just asked if I wanted a monitor.
Okay.
And they got, like, it was given to them. He says, I want nothing to do with it.
I think a case study to look at would be New Windsor. I know when I was at the newly
Well,
elected schools, New
I
Windsor.
don't think so.
Newburgh
Like that.
Newburgh used to have a broken hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's different, right?
It's a lot different because they do 1,000 more calls than us.
You
Their
don't
patient
know if
demographics are
it's
way better.
Sure.
And they only have a 10-mile max.
To go to the hospital.
To go to the
New
hospital.
Windsor.
Right.
Yeah. So they clear faster because it's only what, 20, 30-minute ride. I mean.
But there's certainly areas we can identify in what they're doing from a business model that we can apply here that will create more revenue for you.
Henceforth, but what I was saying, that's why they're so easy to get out, back and around for the calls.
Yeah.
Where our calls take over an hour to hour and a half.
And then sometimes you need to have two ambulance corps situated in one spot for calls instead of just
It's a
one.
whole big debacle.
We're working on this. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, all right, so let's go back to the MLSS, because I'm not clear. This is the last 3 months, you've paid them $16,000-$17,000, them being, according to this.
Yeah, well, we haven't paid them.
Well, you billed for $16,000-$17,000.
They billed us, yeah, right.
They billed us. Now, can you just go over that slower to me? There's your calls that come in that you can't handle? That they handle?
No. Go ahead. Okay, so the bill we're receiving is for Medicare services. So because we have so many Medicaid, Medicare patients, which that's why that bill, yes, yes, but that's why that bill's so high.
You guys get a call, when I call you coming?
They did this morning, they came for me.
Okay. Well,
And I'll tell you,
you're not on Medicare.
but they beat Mobile Life.
No, okay, so let's go to this.
So basically, so we have an agreement, Medicare agreement, basically says that Medicare pays the transporting agency, which would be us. We bill it at the ALS rate. And then we also, in turn, now pay Mobile Life a flat rate of $365 per patient.
So these are patients that Mobile Life picked up?
No, we picked them up, and we met up with a medic, and they got on because that patient
You're paying
needed
Mobile Life
it.
for not showing up, pretty much, because it's their.
They got in the ambulance with him and
Yes,
helped them.
it's not because they didn't show up, it's because they're our primary ALS provider.
Correct, they can't,
I can't say, all right.
Go ahead, try it.
So I can. So let's say you're having heart problems, right? I come pick you up. They're gonna send Mobile Life because it's gonna get CAD like that. It's gonna probably get heart problems, ACD, Charlie response, or Delta.
Goes into a different level.
Yeah, so it's different levels. So they're gonna send a paramedic, which unfortunately Mobile Life is our paramedic service for the area.
Okay.
Wherever they're coming from, Newburgh, wherever they're coming from, right? So we'll pick you up and we'll start going because we're not gonna delay patient care. Because it's hard to explain why I sat on scene with somebody who got chest pain for 10, 15 minutes waiting for a unit when I have an ambulance sitting outside, you know what I mean? So we'll throw you in the ambulance, we'll start going. If we meet up with them, we meet up with them. If we don't, we don't. But if I cancel them when we get on scene or whatever, if I cancel them and they're in the same direction as me and we can meet up, and God forbid, the Department of Health gets a wind of it, or something happens, or you, like, say something happens and you sue us, it's a lot. We're in hot water because I canceled a higher level of care knowing I could have met up with them, and because they have ABLs, it's all tracked, so they know where they are, they know when they got canceled, it says where they are when they got canceled. There's just so much factors into play where it comes up to that stuff. It's just so hard. I mean, I don't want to say cheat the system, but you can't cheat the system. You know what I mean?
Would you agree that the place that you want to get to, and for the town of Montgomery in terms of maximizing the services we can provide, is for you guys to be able to provide those services, so you don't have to worry about these
Correct.
issues?
Down the road, that was the projected, but it's unfortunately money is an issue.
Sure.
And now that, so basically got ruined last year once they changed the platform for Medicare. So they changed the platform of what can get paid out. So what we get paid, and then they say, now you can't go after them. So like we can't try to collect on it at all. They say this is what you get and you can't do anything about it.
Right.
Basically they say this is what you get and then we can't go after, like I can't say, hey, well, I can bill them for the residual. Medicaid you can, it's illegal, it's welfare, I can't go after them regardless. They give us $140?
$205.
Oh, now it went up?
No, it's $205 for now.
Oh, for now. It changes, yeah, it fluctuates, but $200, whatever.
It's $2.5 million.
And then Medicare, it's like
405 in that ballpark.
And then yeah, but now we can't even go after what that flat rate, because I think it's what, 40?
Yeah, 850.
So we built flat rate, so we half of that, and then they say, nope, sorry, no more, and now we can't go after them for anything.
You
Not even try.
Eat that and pay.
Yeah, we're eating. Last year we ate, it was almost $500,000 we ate of Medicare and Medicaid together. $500,000 that we couldn't collect because of the guidelines and rules for Medicare and Medicaid.
And if our illustrious, fair leader of the state gets his way,
it's gonna be worse.
It'll be even worse.
It's gonna be really bad.
Can I add a short story onto the ALS? It doesn't have to do with Medicaid.
Go ahead,
It's the other
Councilman
end of the
Brown.
spectrum, but this morning, as I was saying to you guys, we had an accident at the house and we had to call 911. My son had a possible head injury and I had fallen down the stairs as well. By the time that I had called, first off, thank you to all the first responders that showed up to my house. I have no idea who you guys all are except for the people that came in the house because I was wrecked. But besides the point, I will say that our town of Montgomery ambulance force showed up, was on scene, he was assessed, we had various EMTs there, He was strapped down in a car seat in the ambulance, headed down the driveway, when the driver asked the paramedic in the back seat if we needed ALS. So all that time with a possible head injury of a 18-month-old child, that my son was in the ambulance at the end of my driveway, and we were en route to Orange Regional. And that's how long it took Mobile Life to get there. I knowing what I've learned from our ambulance corps and other sources and McNamee Brothers, I knew what ALS was, and I said, no, we don't need them, go. Right. And by the time that I got into the stop end of my driveway on Browns Road, Mobile Life went by. So this is the exact reason why we need them to be on site, because that time lost for Mobile Life to get there, they were in Walden. They came from the station in Walden. And if we're contracting outside agencies, we don't know how long it takes them to get places.
And let me be clear, and I think you're meaning to make this as well. When it comes to Mobile Life, they're not doing anything wrong. Yeah. It's that they're in such demand all over the place. So I just don't want anyone, and I know you didn't either, want anyone to be left with the thought that, oh, they're not
Yeah, so
working
I'll clarify Mobile Life. Listen, Mobile Life is a great service. They've always done good by us. Never done anything bad to us. They've always helped out when they could. But just like anybody else, they're strapped for manpower. You know, they can't, everything's in demand. EMTs, paramedics. And plus they're trying to cover their districts, so it's just right now they have to cover their districts just like we have to cover ours. You know what I mean? So they're lacking of trying to get us. They've been trying to improve things like they do, like medic fly cars and stuff like that. But they're just so overwhelmed with all their contracts that it's hard to get them to come out to Montgomery all the time. But for the most part, we get them when we can. It's a hit and miss, but. It's not their fault.
They are coming from Newburgh area, Middletown area. I know that everybody thinks there is a station over at Albany Post Road, but that ambulance is specifically not for Montgomery.
Right, and that's another point. There are communities that contract with Mobile Life, and part of that contract is that they have to stay in a certain location and be available for that specific area. So that's another piece of this. All right. Any other comments or questions for these fine individuals before we make our motions?
Can I just ask, do we need to do a resolution to give them this money, or just a motion to
So,
give them this money?
Our attorney advised me to advise them to send these letters with the specific requests, and this will all become part of a contract. And these are funds that are being requested that are being taken from the fund that we've allocated, and we will clean it up later in more of a formal agreement, but that we can act to just approve these requests, correct? Okay.
Okay, but this letter says 40,000, and this is 40,468.99. So do we just want to fix this letter?
Correct.
The motion needs to have the exact amount.
Correct.
For the record.
The letter is that number. The request and the formal motion we would make is $40,468.89.
So I motion to approve the $40,468 $40,000, yeah, I'm sorry, $40,468, and is it 89 or 99?
It's 89.
89 cents. I thought it was 89, but Cindy said 99.
Okay, so offset.
In accordance with the letter dated
February 6th, 2020.
Letter dated February 6th, 2020, submitted with the breakdown and summary of invoices that are currently due or overdue by the ambulance company, and for those funds to be used specifically to pay those invoices and for the ambulance company to provide confirmation to the town board that the money was used to pay those bills.
And we discussed that internally. They're gonna be able to work with their, hey guys, so we worked with them. They're gonna be able to, and we'll just put this in the motion.
I have a question before we continue.
Go ahead.
On the bottom of where it says 40,000, there's also a $3,600 figure here for the town of Montgomery.
That's separate. That's not included in that.
Yeah,
and this
that's
is associated in a separate letter. Was that it?
Yeah, it was on the bottom of this.
Yeah, that's just a note. That's just a note. Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, just so to be clear, in case you didn't hear it, as part of the motion, we'll make clear that the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps would provide us with proof that, in fact, these bills were paid, and they know, and there's going to be a way for them to determine that with their internal individuals to show us that very quickly, not quickly, but easily.
Can we cut the checks payable to these, or we have to give them the 40,000 and let them
I
cut
think
the
it would make
checks?
more sense for them to do that, for us to just cut the check. They're vendors, I mean, they probably have the.
Yeah.
I
Value
mean,
systems, yeah.
yeah, that's,
I would agree.
any further discussion on the motion made, who seconded? Seconded by Sheriff. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Second request, this is, as per our discussion at the task force meeting, January 31st, 2020. They would like to consider, Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps would like to consider waiving the rent, for second half of 2019, of $600 per month, totaling $3,600. And also to consider waiving the rent for this year, 2020, in the amount of $7,200, so that would be the whole year. And again, if you're asking from a budgetary standpoint, how we make up for that, we've budgeted $100,000.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
With the same, we don't need caveats, because this is just waiving.
Unless the board has any other discussion, it's been seconded.
Okay.
Discussion.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. Okay, first step, we have a long way to go, and we're gonna be setting some dates for more task force meetings. We're gonna be doing a lot of work, and Sherry, thank you for your time on that, and working with me on the task force. We got a long way to go, but here's a start, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
For your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, used car sales law. This is something that's been discussed for several months now. We had discussed it, not this board previously, aside from when it was mentioned at our last meeting, but this is,
No, the last board didn't discuss it.
no,
It's
at the last meeting,
Okay.
I wanna
Yes,
say.
I'm sorry.
It was discussed in the community, I would say, as part of the topic of conversation. Other municipalities have adopted these types of laws. Have you guys had a chance to really look at it before our attorney comments on it a little bit? Will, do you mind just giving a quick synopsis of this?
Yeah, there's,
Really, I'm not heard in the back.
You speaking to the microphone?
it's not working, I'm sorry. I'll try and talk.
Oh, look, just grab it, go ahead.
Just put it,
It's
put it,
strange.
put it closer.
You just talk right into it, maybe, just grab it.
I got batteries. Just bring it
Okay,
closer.
is that any better?
Much better.
Thank you.
Most people don't wanna hear from the lawyer. Me being one of them.
We're paying for it, we wanna hear it.
You just keep going, you're paying for it. The board directed us to prepare a definition of used car sales, which was derived from the town of Crawford's law. That's what we were asked to use. I'll read it, it's very quick. Definition of used car sales: the sale of used vehicles, whether or not in conjunction with the sale of new vehicles, but excluding the sale of salvaged vehicles, vehicles with a salvage title, and vehicles not in running condition when delivered to the site of the used car sales. Foregoing exclusion shall not apply to the sale of used cars when such sales are incidental and subordinate to an automobile repair shop. The one concern I raised with using Crawford's definition is the section that says vehicles not in running condition when delivered to the site of the used car sales. The reason I raise that concern is sometimes a car has a dead battery. Sometimes a car has an engine problem, but it's not a junker, it just needs either a new battery, needs a new set of plugs, and it's gonna be running again. And I don't know that it's gonna be a discussion point for this board to see if that's the intent. Obviously, salvage vehicles are a different situation, and that's part of what precipitated this, but I would ask for some discussion if this is, I mean, no public hearing's been set yet, but I would ask for some discussion on the intent that the board has for this. Because I don't want to see a situation where a legitimate used car dealer comes before us and says, hey, you know, I just bought a car at an auction, I went to the auction, and I bought 10 cars, 3 of them need new batteries or a new starter or something to get them running, but they're otherwise in perfectly good running condition. So that's
Not,
what.
not to speak on behalf of the whole board, but I think the intent is to not create the, an abundance of junkyard mentality, not necessarily
Right.
for businesses that are trying
Right.
to
That's why,
do the right thing.
that's why the Crawford law is, I would.
Flawed?
What's that?
Flawed?
It's just a different way they wanna do it.
Good job.
It's, every municipality has it different. I'm just saying, we may wanna look at that specific language and perhaps, consider it, that's all.
Excellent, Ben, that was great. That was good. All right. I would reconsider that. What do you guys think? Will we just take it out completely, Will?
What was the actual words, I'm sorry, that you wanted to strike?
The language in here.
Section.
And,
Section 2, use
I'm sorry, section 2, the definition, which is the only, the rest of it is just the normal stuff about local law.
Yeah.
And vehicles not in running condition when delivered to the site of the used car sales. Now, what we may wanna do there, so as not to completely open that up to interpretation, say something in the neighborhood, perhaps put some definition in there of a minimum that it would take to get a car running, so lots of cars aren't running and they may be junk, but some of them may need minimal expense to get it running again.
So you would put a threshold?
Perhaps a threshold, or if anybody else has any other ideas, I don't wanna.
Or a minimum time, how to do a time for them to get the battery in and get it started.
How would we enforce that?
Well, like everything else, our code enforcers are gonna have to be
diligent.
Yeah, put it on their list.
Working on this, we can have all the laws we want to enforce it. So we can either take it out altogether, if that's what you wanna do.
How about if you did something like that are not resaleable with, minimum repairs or,
Well, we don't wanna make it too, subjective, minimum repairs, we want it to be clear, so what the intent of the
well,
board is.
a salvage title is a vehicle, well, a salvage still can be repaired.
Yeah, we owned a farm truck like that where it had a salvage title because it was totaled and we bought it in running condition.
Even if it does have a salvage title, it still could be fixed and made runnable again and go through the state,
Right, but the way this is written right now, is if it's got a salvage title, it's not gonna be available for sale at a used car dealership.
Why not?
Some are.
That's the way it's written right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
That's
again,
not really
that's
written.
why we're having a board discussion.
So-
You guys have to decide how you wanna go with this.
So what about this? What about if the sentence, under section 2, used car sales, sale of used vehicles, whether or not in conjunction with the sale of new vehicles, but excluding the sale of salvage vehicles, vehicles with a salvage title and vehicles not in running condition, period. Strike when delivered to the site of used car sales.
But again, not in running condition can mean a lot of things. It can mean a very minor fix, or it can mean a thing that's a total disaster.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
That's
concerned
true.
with that language.
But my concern is, my concern is also like yours, the battery change is fine, but when you get totaled vehicles in that are leaking fluids, that are draining batteries, that's the big concern, that's what this law is supposed to prohibit. Yes.
So how do you differentiate and not get caught into some of the other vehicles that are not junk? What's the wording? That's what we're figuring out, which I don't think we're having a lot of luck on.
Well, why don't you let me,
Yeah, we
we
can-
don't have to set a public hearing.
No.
on that.
Let's take some time to think about it.
Let's revisit this at the next meeting, now that I know exactly what
The intent is.
you wanna do, let me have a little bit of a chance to modify this and.
Okay.
Just as a point of reference, can I give you the Village of Maybrook's law?
Sure.
Because there's this, they did pass this,
Okay.
and they're a village within our boundaries. Thank
All
you.
right.
Great, thank you.
Anything else before we move on? Okay. Next up is the Town of Montgomery IDA letter pilot deviation notification. So, we all remember our reorganization meeting when we had a discussion about our displeasure of the 15-year pilot that was offered, and we looked at different options that were available to us to, let people know our displeasure and the town IDA board. We drafted a letter that I read on behalf of the town board that was very strongly written, and because of that letter, they came back to the table. And when we had a negotiation, I did put an offer out there for a community benefit agreement, and it was in the amount of just over $3 million or so, and I thought that would be a starting point that we could work from to get them to the table. When we got to the table, and Ron was there with me as well, they said they would commit to doubling the initial first 5 years of the pilot of the investment. So just to be very clear and how this process started, the Town of Montgomery IDA has a pilot that they offer. This was 2 years in the making, so the applicant came in, they said, okay, that's what we're gonna be offered, and that was their knowledge of what would be offered. During the process, with individuals saying that this wasn't good enough, they decided to put in paying 10% in the first 5 years as opposed to 0 in the first 5 years. And that equals to a number of about 1.4 million, about 70% of which goes to the school district. A larger percentage then goes to the county and to the town, or another percentage I should say. So what they've decided to offer is to double that. So that would equal to just over about $3 million in the first 5 years that we would not have seen had they just taken advantage of the pilot that was offered to them by the Town of Montgomery IDA.
Wait, what was your numbers? You went from 1.4 doubling to just over 3.
Yeah, it's just
1.4 times 2
is 2.8, right?
How did we get over 3?
No, it's close to 3. I'm sorry, I did not mean to say over 3.
Okay.
Just about. Here's the problem with the numbers. They're not official numbers, right? They're based off of assessments that have not been figured out yet. So we make, from what I've been explained, best guesses in some of these numbers.
Which are not in the contract as per the contract, or the application that they provide the IDA, so.
Correct, which gives our assessor a basis on what to assess the value at, which is usually close.
So they have it in the application, but they don't make the applicant follow the application because they give leniency to the assessor.
Can you say that again? Because I don't know what you're saying.
Well, follow me on this. It's in the application, right?
Yeah.
The financials are supposed to be in the application.
Correct.
Okay, it says draft in the
Yes.
application.
Yes.
It has not, whatever happened. But, so why would the IDA have that in their application if they're not making the applicant follow it?
What do you mean they're not making the applicant follow it?
Did you look at the application I gave you with all the tabs? It was one of the tabs that shows that the financials are not included in the application.
Okay. So are you just saying that the
I'm
numbers
just stating
are
the fact that the IDA doesn't follow their own applications.
Okay.
Go ahead, do you wanna continue on, and then I can?
Yeah, no, sure. So basically what I would say to the board is, when we came back and went to the negotiating table, they decided that they would double their initial offer that they had from 10% to 20%. And it's up to us as a board if we want to go back to the IDA and say, hey, listen, because of this extra 10% that they're going to be paying in taxes, which equals to about 1.4 million, could be more. And then you add in the other benefits that come from the length of the pilot and the fact that the business would be coming in and all those other issues, then we would be able to provide feedback to the IDA on how they would move forward. So that's up to you guys, and just would love to get your feedback. I know Kristen's got a bunch of things, but do you guys have any comments to the initial news that they will be putting in an additional potential 1.4 million into our taxpayers' pockets?
I think it's great. I thought this was,
It's only a piece of candy.
I thought this was for the purpose of revising the pilot in the future, dropping the number of years to 15 to 10.
Glad you brought that up.
I didn't know it had to do with patting ourselves on the back for doing a good job.
No, so that's not what this discussion's about.
Okay.
So in the future, what I've said and what I think we should all commit to is working with the IDA to put an end totally to 15-year pilots. Because we're in this position now, on the 11th hour, when we took office, the IDA actually approved the pilot. This was just a formality to transfer that approval right? So we want to make sure in the future, if we're going to say to the IDA, hey, we're glad that we got the 10%, you know, we're going to have a less of a position in terms of you dropping the pilot, but we need to make sure this never happens again. We need to rework this pilot agreement so that we don't offer 15-year pilots, that we make sure it's maybe 10-year, and we offset that and line it up a little more with what the 485B offers. And for anyone who needs some clarification, if the pilot program was withdrawn, like Medline withdrew their pilot agreement, they still have access to what's called a 485B. So they're still only paying 50% of their taxes in year one. And what we would like to see as a board from our internal discussions is working with the IDA and having the school district at the table as well to revamp the 15-year pilot they offer to ensure that we can shorten that to 10 years and to ensure that there's never another commitment to a company where they pay 0% of taxes in the first 5 years, because we all find that to be unacceptable.
So, Will, have you followed this case pretty closely? Specifically the transfer of the benefits from the Blue Water Industry Partners, and if that's a Blue Water something or other partners, I apologize that they keep changing names, thank you. To, isn't it Blue Water USCF? According to Brian, you told me once that they can transfer the assignment already.
That was something that was discussed, yes.
I cannot find in any documentation that legally they can transfer from one entity to another, the assignment of the pilot. Can they do that?
Well, that's why they went back to the IDA.
Right, so the previous, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
The project was approved by the IDA back in, I believe, November. They've come back to the IDA for this transfer. One of the things theoretically that could happen is if the transfer of ownership was denied by the IDA, they could just keep it in the current ownership for the time being and get their benefits, quite honestly. So what this board did after the letter was sent, it got them back to the table and incentivized them to, for purposes of moving forward, to raise their benefit, their payment levels to the town. That's really where we're at.
So I could answer, thank you for clarifying that. Basically what my conversation with you was by getting them back to the table, there was still no guarantee, or there still was no, they didn't have to do anything more than what they did. It was the point that I was trying to make. And that also lowered the ability of our negotiating power. But the fact that we were able to at least get it doubled is a testament, hopefully, to their commitment to our community. And that's what I took out of it.
Okay, so the change, is there any other changes that actually occurred during the process besides the name change?
Well, they clarified some things in the assignment application. I think one of the points that you raised was with regard to the wastewater treatment plant. They just recently, I think it was this week, they submitted some revisions to the document, and one of them.
So you guys know, Councilwoman Brown gave us all a bunch of different issues with the pilot. Those issues were given to their attorney, and I believe there was a response that I forwarded to you in terms of
from the IDA's
attorney, giving a synopsis of some of your concerns. So did those get met?
No.
Is what I, okay.
Okay.
But, okay, go ahead.
Let me
Yes,
just read
please.
that part I was looking for. Pursuant to this is their change. Pursuant to the conditions of the site plan approval, the developer will record an offer of dedication for the wastewater treatment plant, which will provide the town of Montgomery an ongoing option to take the wastewater treatment plant in the future or never. So I think one of the bones of contention that was raised by certain people on the board and I believe the public was what was, I guess, perceived as some sort of misrepresentation that the board was obligated to take the plant sometime in the future. The applicant, with this assignment, they're acknowledging that the board is under no such obligation. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, because I didn't see that letter.
Okay.
Thank you, Will.
So, I mean, I'm just wondering what else changed, because I have notes from, I have the actual minutes from the idea meeting, Brian, when you read that letter?
Yeah, sure.
So my question is, and this is quoting, according to a recent Bloomberg report, Amazon's approximate market value is near or exceeds 1 million, trillion, I don't know, there's a whole lot of zeros. The financial, I can't keep track of all these zeros. The financial assistance at issue that here therefore represents approximately 0.0025% of the company's value. Conversely, the real property tax exemptions, if granted, total $21,500,000. Obviously, these exemptions would be massive and detrimental to long-term financial consequences to the taxing authorities. You stated about Medline and how they took the 485B. You stated Sailfish Amazon is exponentially larger and certainly will not suffer any consequences to its existence and operations. Sailfish Amazon is exponentially larger and certainly will not suffer any consequences to its existence and operations should the instant application be denied. Next paragraph. The town board believes that the company is moving forward with plans to commence construction by virtue of approvals. In the opinion of the town board, the primary purpose of granting benefits by an industrial development agency is to attract new business to an area where it's critical. The financial assistance is the only way to facilitate the project. Due to the inherent geographical benefits of the town of Montgomery, as well as the substantial financial strength of the applicant, Sailfish, like Medline, should proceed with the project without agency involvement. It is Accordingly, it is simply unnecessary for the instant application to be granted. We did ask that they kept the public hearing open. For that, I thank them. But upon due deliberation, determined that the application for the assignment of the approvals previously granted should be granted by the agency on November 12, 2019 should be denied. And upon further deliberation, determined that the November 12, 2019 agency with approval should be withdrawn. So what has changed?
So very clearly,
that we would change our strong stance like that on this project.
So very clearly, coupled with the acknowledgement that we want to change a 15-year pilot moving forward, and also the fact that they don't have to put any more money into it, we would be making a decision as a board if that extra 10%, doubling their initial 5-year investment, totaling $1.4 million over the first 5 years, is substantial enough for us to draft another letter to the IDA saying, while we have these concerns, and these are things that we're going to address in the future, so we're not put in this position again, that in light of the 1.4 million, we're comfortable with them moving forward. Do we want to entertain that? And that's the question to this board.
We have Medline, which I don't mean to compare them,
right?
But we have a facility of similar size and structure going in, possibly going in the town. It's in front of the planning board. They withdrew their application and is taking the 485B. I mean, if you look at the numbers, if they take the 485B, let's see here, 485B, taxes paid would be $36,825,431. I mean, that is a substantial amount as compared to the extra 10% of $25,999,243. Excuse me, my decimal are a little off. You know, I strongly think that we should recommend that they take the 485B as Medline did. I mean, they're already moving forward, right? They've made commitments in various public meetings saying that they're going to use local labor.
So to your point,
so they're using our local guys for a year. That's their big bone of contention. Take the 485B and move forward, and we get more money in taxes.
So that's not accurate. Their public statements are 100% that if we did not have the financial incentive, this is very much public record, that they would not go forward with the project.
Have you noticed the statement that was stated by Todd DiOrio, who's of the Building and Trade statement, during one of the public hearings, that stated that he talked to Blue Water Sailfish, and they stated that they would be using local labor. Are you familiar with that statement?
That doesn't take away what I just said about the public statements of Sailfish saying that they would not move forward with the project if they did not receive incentives. It doesn't take away that statement. Whatever Todd has to say about them using local labor is contingent upon them moving forward with the project.
So they're going to walk away from this project. That's what you're telling me, right? They're
That's
gonna
not
walk
what
away.
I'm telling you, that's what they're
Well,
saying.
That's
Yes.
what you're saying.
So
Okay,
did
so where
Medline.
are they gonna go?
So did Medline.
Specifically, if they're gonna say where they're gonna walk away from, I wanna know where they're going to go. And don't tell me, do not tell me Syracuse, do not tell me, Scanticoke, do not tell me. Yes, absolutely, it needs, I wanna know where they're gonna go, cause they're threatening that they're gonna leave, okay, you have 2 years to put in the time that they've put in here. And they're saying they're gonna go, where are you gonna go?
It's not they, right? Like, they're the tenant, right? But the people that are.
No, I'm saying Blue Water.
Okay,
I'm not saying Amazon, I'm saying Blue Water, the partners.
okay. All right, well, you're talking about Blue Water staying put if Amazon is not their tenant. Is that what you're trying to contend?
No, I'm saying if Blue Water is stating that if we do not give them the 15-year pilot, they're gonna pull out, right? They're gonna leave.
They already have the 15-year pilot, actually.
Amazon said that.
Amazon said that they would not, that remain as their tenant, and that could jeopardize the fact that Blue Water is there, yes.
I had thought that Blue Water said that they will leave.
If they lose their tenant, they may also, could also go under, yes.
Okay, so my point is, where are they going to go? Where's Blue Water gonna go? Do you guys know?
Look.
This isn't Blue Water, it's Amazon.
Yeah.
Where's Amazon?
No, according to the application,
All right,
Blue Water partners are the application.
Hold on, let's get some order, okay?
They're the
Let's
landlord.
keep this conversation
Amazon's
internal.
Okay,
let's
so then I would ask you to say to them, where are they going to go?
Okay.
Because that's what Blue Water Partners put in their application, that they're gonna leave.
You're saying that there's no way that there are other sites where they're looking at right now where they can get
I
their
just wanna
needs
know.
figured out?
I just wanna know, because if there
They're not
are, then
gonna-
I will stand up here and say that I stand corrected.
I understand that,
But
but
I
they're
would
not.
like to know where are other sites that they say that they will move to, that they could wait 2 years for approvals that they have
Who's
taken.
to say that they have to wait 2 years?
Okay, but they've waited 2 years in our town.
That's correct, they've
Yeah.
invested a lot.
So that's what I'm saying, that's what I'm using as an example. If they can move to another town, get it through in 6 months, where are they gonna go?
I understand what you're saying.
How do you afraid to ask them that?
Well, I mean, that aside, how are you guys feeling about the IDA letter and the deviation and the fact that we were able to help negotiate an additional 1.4 million for our taxpayers? Is that enough for us to go back to the IDA and say, hey, there's a big problem here that we're gonna fix, but this is a start? Is that something that you guys are comfortable with?
Yes, I'm comfortable working with the idea.
Yes.
Okay, and when you say you're comfortable with it, it would mean us drafting another letter, laying out that this is not something we wanna promote moving forward. We wanna put an end to this and have conversations with you and the school district and fix 15-year pilots and make sure that we don't do that. But in light of this deviation, that we are supportive of them moving forward. I mean, that's what our letter would say, and to Kristen's point, it would be a very stark difference in our initial letter.
Have the other districts been notified?
Yes, school district, absolutely.
Where do they stand?
They're standing pat in the sense that they would ask to have them not consider the pilot, and have them drop the pilot, the school district.
So we know, everybody knows that the school district and the VCTA and whatever entities
Yeah, that's important for us to know, sure.
are not behind this pilot.
This specific pilot, correct?
Yep, they want it to withdraw.
As is with the
They want-
deviation at 20%.
They
yes.
want them to take the 485B or the 10-year pilot from the county. Whatever, another
I mean,
option,
so-
they're as of right to the 485.
And so did we, and so do we. But this is the offer on the table, and the question posed to us is this enough if the threat is that they're not gonna be here? And that speaks to the support of the project in general. So we ought to own up and make our decision and tell people where we stand.
And I think the letter should ask the IDA to work with us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That would be a huge part of this. So we can't just say, hey, we don't care about 15-year pilots anymore. We do. We don't wanna go with that route anymore. Yeah. Sure.
Yes, no.
Right, yes, ask. I mean, we're on the
I
same
agree.
page, they agree too, but yes.
I agree.
All right, Kristen?
No.
No. All right, so Will, would you consider drafting a letter to the IDA, to the specific thoughts that we just gave in terms of being pleased with the 10% increase and doubling the deviation, the pilot agreement for the first 5 years?
100% increase.
It was 100% increase, double increase, whatever way you want to describe
I'd put double.
it. But coupled with the
That's
fact that we
ridiculous.
would entertain a discussion with the IDA to ensure moving forward that we would reevaluate 15-year pilots offered to companies who want to do business in town of Montgomery.
Can
That's
we-
the big issue here.
Can we amend that not to say doubling, because doubling to me sounds like we are selling the project on behalf of Sailfish.
I
We
don't-
need to say 20%.
I'll circulate the draft of the letter
Okay.
to the entire board for comment and go from there.
Thank you. Do you need a motion for that? Okay.
All right.
Well, you know what? Just poll the board in terms of support for such a letter, please.
Ron?
I support the letter.
Cindy? Sherry?
Yes. No.
Yes. Okay. All right, moving forward, resolution hiring 2 court officers, Frank Patine and James Carassi. All right, Ray Osmond sent me a letter. It spoke to the process and our need for court officers in terms of helping subsidize our full-time police officers. Butch, do you want to introduce these gentlemen and give us a little bit of background?
Oh, there's Frank in the back. Of course, I think everybody knows Frank Patine.
Hey, Frank.
I think I had a birthday while I was sitting here, though.
No, look at that.
I don't want to have another.
You didn't reach mandatory retirement age, did you, Frank?
We didn't make our motion yet, Frank.
And this is Mr. Carossi, and both upon the recommendation of Judge Osmond, basically the court officer function supplements the police officers that are assigned to the court, and they enhance security. They run the magnetometer, they work with the judges in delivery and receipt and delivery of the paperwork and different things. And they're supervised by a police officer at all times. Most often, Officer June is in the court most of all the time, or we have another 1 or 2 officers that could be in his absence. But we got a really well-functioning court security program here. I'm proud of the way it was set up. The judge is very happy with it. We're going to be reviewing the actual general order that pertains to, updated. It's about 8 years old. I'm going to be working with the judge to update that protocol, and it's a good fit for us. It allows us to provide for officers in the court to supplement the police officers and enhance security overall.
All right, this is from Judge Osmond. Dear Supervisor Marr and Town Board, I write in support of this application submitted for your consideration for the hiring of qualified court officers. Court officers provide necessary security and maintain decorum during our sessions. As the board may be aware, the number of qualified court officers available to work during court operations has decreased over the last several years due to attrition. The current applicants each possess the requisite training and qualifications for the position. Please contact them if you have any issues. I don't know Frank really well. I don't know you, sir, but I welcome you to the team. And would anyone like to entertain a motion to approve our resolution hiring? Do they need to be separate?
We have two separate resolutions.
Okay, the first resolution would be hiring
Mr. Patine.
Mr. Frank Patine.
I'll make that.
What's the amount?
I'll second.
$17.75 per hour.
I'll second.
Is that subject to probate for the first 6 months or first year, like most new hires are?
6-month probation.
You can impose a 6-month probationary period. It's a non-competitive position.
Okay.
So it's really up to the board, but as a non-competitive position, it's up to you. It's not mandated by civil service law.
Does this fall under, does this fall under the competitive, or the EBA?
No. They're non-competitive means they don't have to take a civil service exam to be hired, and they're not covered by the collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you for clarifying.
We will have that.
Okay, and the both resolutions, just so we're clear, are subject to satisfactory background checks.
Okay.
Which that we'll do internally, and I'm already aware that there's going to be no problem with either appointment.
All right, you see, Butch is on the line now.
Councilwoman Mellick's seconded already.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. Can I hear a motion for hiring court officer James Carassi? Is that the same rate? Same details?
I'll make that motion.
I think Councilwoman Brown.
Beat you to it, yeah.
Councilman Brown beat you. Seconded by Ron Feller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. Congratulations, both of you. Welcome to the Town of Montgomery team.
Thank you.
Now you both get to go home while we all have to stay here, so.
4 o'clock comes early.
I hear you.
Thank you for
very
staying.
much. We'll talk.
Thank you.
Reach out for you.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, next one is resolution to declare certain highway department vehicles equipment as surplus. Sean, you wanna speak to this?
When I took over, we kinda did a house cleaning of what we use and we don't use, and sat down with all the guys, kinda figured out what we didn't need anymore, and made up the surplus list, and there's
Quite a bit.
quite a bit. There was a lot of stuff in there.
We don't have, did we make one motion, we don't have to list all of them?
Yeah, no, the resolution is one motion.
I know, we don't have to, but we can do.
Yeah, the resolution's based on the attached schedule.
If you guys don't mind, I'll just read it, for the public benefit. John Sared chainsaw, minimum bid $25. STH 10488 AV
Do you
chain.
really wanna put minimums on?
I was told I had to, but.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, we wanna have.
I didn't think we did any.
Yeah, it's preferable to have a minimum.
Okay, sorry.
Minimum bid $25. Husqvarna 23 compact chainsaw, minimum bid $25. Combination drilling tapping machine with hand tools, minimum bid $1,500. Delta drill press, minimum bid $25. Dixie chopper, minimum bid $500. Ferris mower, minimum bid $25. Sauk Valley oil distribution system, minimum bid $50. Sauk Valley oil distribution system, minimum $50. Champion Pneumatic Mac Air compressor, minimum bid $100. Truck body for 2008 Ford F-250, minimum bid $100. Buffalo Springfield roller scrap, minimum bid $2,000. Davy tow behind air compressor, minimum bid $300. Centurion 40K standby generator, minimum bid $500.
Quick question. How's, and I apologize, I did not talk to you about this ahead of time, but how is the truck with the rotted out body? Are we gonna hang on to that for a little while, or would we
I
have?
tried to have it towed in because it broke down, but I'm working on, actually pretty much a capital plan on purchasing small pickup trucks. I have to sit down with Robert Green, I think next week, their contract, so we can try to get something set in place. So we can try to get something set in place to buy a few new pickup trucks. We had to sit down with Enterprise. I don't really think it's cost effective for us to do Enterprise personally. The Enterprise agent actually told me that, not that I was a liar, but I was a liar of how cheap we could get the trucks for. And until I showed him the proof, and then it was all about purchasing it for us. And
Is Robert Green still the holder on the state bid contract? Okay. So that pickup truck in specific will be part of your fleet management plan?
Yeah, that one will be going first.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
This resolution?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. All right, next up, resolution regarding official undertaking of municipal officers. Will, do you want to give us a quick rundown on this one? Thank you, Tara, for bringing it to our attention.
Yeah.
We should get,
Annually, the local government officials who are handling money, signing checks on behalf of the town are required to give their official undertaking that they will discharge their duties properly in terms of handling the money. And this resolution essentially authorizes and directs each of the affected and relevant persons who handle money. In this case, it includes a supervisor, a deputy supervisor, the receiver of taxes, and the town justices, and the highway superintendent to execute their official undertakings for the year. And Tara, I believe this gets filed with the controller's office? Or
The county, for the judges with the county and,
Yeah.
and the justice court.
Correct. So it's basically,
And it actually just is the one judge that just was reelected, because I did the other judge 2
we
years ago.
had the other one? Okay. And Marina's receiver of taxes as well. So
The town
supervisor,
clerk,
deputy
town
supervisor.
I did mine 2 years ago.
Yeah. So basically, that's the long and the short of it. It's a housekeeping resolution.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion?
Who seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. Our last item of the day, Ron Feller, Deputy Supervisor, has been hard at work doing a bit of an audit in terms of recreation and parks in the town of Montgomery. We've been really discussing a potential path forward. I'll let Ron speak to it, and then we'll consider the motion.
Well, in the past, we had a director of Parks and Rec part-time, and we're going in that same direction. We're trying to hire somebody that's gonna take over the Parks and Rec function. They'll be responsible for a couple of part-time attendants, but their primary responsibility will be to coordinate the 4 parks activities we have, as well as the rail trail, scheduling fields, maintenance, capital projects, pretty much everything that has to do with Parks and Rec. I would say, it was posted, there is a job title and it is posted, but it was posted when it was posted 4 years ago, 5 years ago. The salary range was $15 to $20 per hour. The only thing I'd like to change is make that from $17 to $22 an hour. Cost of living gone up. In the meantime, Brian and myself have contacted all the users for our fields, and there's gonna be a meeting February 19th. What we do is we get all the people that represent the football groups, soccer, lacrosse, softball, and baseball. They have to be insured, they have to hold the town harmless, and they have to be non-for-profit. So we get them all in a room and we try to allocate the fields. That's gonna be next February 19th. So if anybody knows of anybody that has a group that like to participate and try to use our fields, you're certainly welcome. It's gonna be at February 19th at 11 o'clock in the town supervisor's office. Also, the Benedict Park Pavilion, Burnett Pavilion is rented out for people to have parties and what have you, birthday parties, graduation parties, and they have to pay a fee, whether they're town residents or not town residents. The fee is adjusted accordingly, but they have to show insurance, and that goes to the director of Parks and Rec also. So in that same group, we're gonna try to hire a park attendant, which will be kind of a police officer or somebody to make sure that things are under control at all times. Sometimes you get some rowdy fans. Sometimes you get people walking their dogs, they're not on a leash. Sometimes there's people vandalizing the area. There's also the rail trail that has to be patrolled. So we're in the process of coming up. Butch has given me some good information on that. With that, we'd like to hire a part-time parks and director.
And procedurally, what we'd be doing is we'd noticing that there's an availability.
Posting the position.
Posting the position.
Yeah, it's all in the budget. We have $150,000 this year. And I've been talking with Sean, our highway department. We'll continue to do the grass cutting and the weed whacking and picking up the garbage cans. And we reviewed the last 2 years of invoices, and he's well within budget. I was thinking about possibility of hiring a local landscaper, but it's done in-house. We know it's gonna get done right, and it's gonna be done in a timely manner. And the money that was allocated for this year's budget should take care of the Parks and Rec department as far as new employees and any highway expenses that are coming up. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for your work on that, time you put into it.
So we need to make a motion to post this
Yes.
position.
Now, is there a time frame that needs to be associated with that, or no?
No.
Okay.
Sherry, I have a question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It would be desirable to tell the applicants when they should have their applications into the town board, because you want to consider someone as soon as possible.
So we'll put that in, but that doesn't need to be included in any motion to post, correct?
No.
Okay.
So I have a question. Sherry, I know last year, and I apologize if, again, I didn't get to go to talk to you about this, I was hoping I would have, but you had an idea for Parks and Rec. Is this different from that?
No, it's pretty similar. I've been talking around it.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that your concerns were.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be something that starts out part-time, and maybe we could work our way into full-time Parks and Rec, you know, but I mean, to just give somebody a full-time job to start it off, it's gonna be tough.
I had the job for 2 years, and it's a part-time job, and, we are gonna try to create some revenue. I noticed, I don't think there's anything budgeted in the revenue line, because we didn't get a lot of revenue, but there is gonna be a fee schedule for the usage of our fields, and, hopefully it will become something that's, you know,
A revenue.
We're not gonna make money on it, but maybe it would cost
Hold
you
its
know,
own,
you know,
you know.
pay for a couple of attendants. We have beautiful parks. I mean, in case anybody doesn't, Benedict Park is beautiful. Maria Park is.
I mean, I would
nice.
like to see somebody move forward like this person to get more fields in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
we
we like to get more fields. We like to get security beefed up. We like to get cameras in parks that they don't have it in now. Gates that open and close on a regular manner. The right kind of infield dust, brick dirt that gets put in there. It can't be the same dirt as you hired somebody down the road. It has to be something that kids are gonna be putting in their mouths, and it has to be coming from the right place. When the fields get weeded, we can't just spray it with, ortho kill. It has to be a particular type of spray. The person spraying it can't be toxic. Our playground in Benedict has minimum qualifications of, when you come down a slide or something, it has to be X amount of inches thick. It's a mulch, but it has to come from this particular type of organization that it's not treated with chemicals. So the fencing has to be looked at, the dugouts have to be looked at. There's a lot of maintenance to parks if done right, and this is the first step. We're behind the 8 ball right now, because in another month or so, everybody's gonna wanna use the parks. And they share the parks. The all-purpose field, the soccer and lacrosse, they share that field. Softball and baseball share that field, okay? There's a softball field also in Berea that's now being shared by Little League fields. Football field has historically been only for football. When the Benedict Park was ripped up about 4 or 5 years ago, that somebody decided to go up there in the winter time and do some figure eights on, the field was put down for about 9 to 12 months, and football graciously they didn't let, but the lacrosse and soccer people use that field. But that field is 30 years old, and a lot of these fields really should be, and in a beautiful world that I'd like to live in, we might look at something kind of astroturf, we might look at resodding the fields correctly, but in the meantime, we got about 900 to 1,000 kids that are using these fields from various organizations. And we don't want to close the fields down. We want to get them out there playing.
Can they also look at I think this might be more of an engineering, but could they also look at the condition of the barn and the house, the Benedict barn?
When they get hired?
What's that?
When this person gets hired?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be a big
that's
part
of the park, and I don't know that they're going to be qualified if you have a recreation. It really depends on who you get, right? Because if you get somebody like Ron who's done building, but can also do recreation, if they could take an inventory of what the barn needs, what the house needs, where we're at, how to move that forward, that would be great.
We were supposed to meet with Jim Farr,
Yes.
Ron and I, and he's gonna do a walkthrough of the barn and see what condition it's in.
How's the house?
I haven't,
Can you
the
add
locks
that
were
to it?
changed a long time ago, and we don't have to do any more.
There's broken
Somebody got
windows,
both
there's
sides?
roof problems,
We own
there's structural, the roof has leaks.
Yeah.
There's a section missing. A lot of the windows are, a lot of the weak on the barn. A lot of the windows are broken.
So the
We
first,
could have a walkthrough.
so the first step in one of these conversations, but many more to come, would be to post a position. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I made that motion.
All right, anybody second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Can you also look
Motion
with Jim
carried.
Farr on the house?
Yeah, we are.
See, okay, because he just said that there's lots on the house and you don't know, yes.
The house too, okay.
When you're out there with
There's a
Jim Farr,
key.
have a look at the
Yes.
house.
We personally don't have
Yeah,
one.
it's called bolt
I
cutters.
just have that one thing on.
Both
We
of
own
them. Well, the house is part of Benedict Park.
Which we own.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
We own a house, I'm not sure it's a Parks and Recreation project, to tell you the truth, might be historical preservation or more than a Parks and Recreation guy to determine what's the problem with the house.
I think what your point was, not to let it fall off the radar.
Yes, please.
Okay.
That was
No.
exactly it. Like, that's.
Okay, public
I
comment?
just want to speak really quick.
That's right, go ahead, Sean, go ahead.
So, I spoke to all of you about it, but The Cornell Local Roads Program reached out, through an email that they have a summer camp intern project. And the summer intern project, basically, they're looking for a civil or mechanical engineer in their first, second, third year of college who would be willing to come in and do a 10-week internship with the town. They would come in and create a 5-year road maintenance program working with Cornell. It's, in total, it would probably cost about $8,000 with payroll, and there is some schooling involved. They have to go to Ithaca for 3 days in May, and it's $60 for the school, plus we have to pay for hotel, but it gives the software for it too. I have to go as well. They'll teach me how to use the software, so once the intern's done, every year it can be updated. And essentially, we would have a 5-year road maintenance program in place so we can figure out budgeting. There are only 15 spots, and 10 of the spots are taken already. So I have to basically give them a letter of intent that we're willing to do this, but I don't have anybody yet. I actually stopped at the school. We're working with the guidance counselor's office to actually try to find a VC graduate, recent graduate who's in college for this still, so it would be a local person involved in the project. And yeah, just all happened fast, so I kind of need to just, I don't know if I need a motion.
No, you pretty much explained it to us. I'll make a motion that he moves forward with that.
I'll second it.
Will?
The only question is, what line is the
Oh,
$8,000?
I have the money within my budget, within the payroll budget and my 0400 street maintenance line.
Yeah, just make that part of the motion where it's coming from.
So it'll come out of the 5110-0100 and the 5110-0400 between payroll and.
Motion made by Sherry, seconded by Councilwoman Brown. Any discussion? All in favor?
Also, just so we're clear, the motion is for Highway Superintendent to inform Cornell that the town is going to participate in this program and undertake to hire an intern as soon as possible.
Right. All right.
Yeah. The hiring process, I have to work with Cornell. They will give us somebody, but they prefer we try to find someone too. So.
You have to include at the rate $15 an hour, if it says it.
We just allocated 8,000 in his budget, so I think that it can't
That
exceed that.
covers the whole thing.
Yeah.
Covers the program, it covers the
Software.
software, the training up in Ithaca. Total 8,000 max.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. All right, anyone from the public who'd like to make a comment, please come to the microphone, state your name.
Brian, are you doing this one from Richard Eastrack, the February 2nd? Because it's requested that it be led by the supervisor at the board meeting.
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay. You have one?
No, you can. Go ahead, Mary Ellen.
So I'm getting old sitting there, getting tired too. Actually, I have a couple of items, and one is about the ambulance corps, and for what it's worth, when you have the task force meeting, I happened to run into someone who's finally become a volunteer with the ambulance corps, but what they said to me was they had a really hard time getting in touch with them.
The ambulance corps?
Yeah, so maybe they need a contact phone number here at Town Hall, a number that gets answered, and that somebody then either gets in touch with the ambulance corps and then they get back to people who want to volunteer. It's all about trying to build volunteers. This one young woman, and later I'll tell you who it is, Brian.
Okay.
I've never had a problem speaking to the ambulance corps. They have gotten me information. When I got all the bills, they got it to me the next day.
You're also a councilwoman.
This is feedback from a resident who wanted to, who subsequently did become a volunteer, but when this person was trying to get in touch with them, had a very hard time.
All right, thank you, Mary Ellen.
So it's just something to look at. Used car sales. In fact, I don't know what the Maybrook law says, but junk cars in Walden are defined, a car has to be able to pass inspection. So I don't know if that helps you with the definition.
You have a dead
Well-
battery, inspection, you know, that's the problem.
Well.
We'll take that under
Yeah,
advisement.
but I mean, it's just one
Just
other
throwing-
way
just
to
throwing that out
define
there.
it. In other words,
It's not
if
part of
it-
the inspection code to see if you have.
We'll take it under advisement. Will's gonna track
Yeah,
his head about
this
it.
is one other thing.
Yeah.
And also,
Drive it
a
in,
question
drive it
about
out.
that, is that also including used trucks? And is it including trailers? Because right now we have this issue about the trailers being parked on
Ah,
Stone
yeah.
Castle Road,
That's true.
which is actually a V&T violation because that is actually part of the road.
We're on it.
It's not, I know you are,
Yep.
because I spoke to Walt about it a while
Cool.
ago. But also in terms of, used car sales on Route 52, coming into the village, those cars certainly are not meeting the town setback. I think town
Did that just get
setback
an
is
ex-
supposed to be 13 feet.
Did that just
from-
get it? Is that part of the property that was just annexed into the village?
Yes, but right, but it still hasn't gone through the whole process yet,
Okay.
I don't think.
All right, no.
But there's others on the other side of the road now that the parcel that's not being annexed in. It's a repair garage, 2 repair garages
Okay.
on the north side. And when you drive through there, it's like you think those cars are like they're right up against you.
No, you're right.
And that's where they have setback laws. February 11th, next Tuesday night, we're gonna have a Historic Preservation Commission meeting, open to the public, obviously, posted last week by the town clerk. We're gonna be discussing, the Calder Mansion rooms. Sean is coming, and we're gonna work on a preliminary, start working towards the idea of what a maintenance plan should involve. And I did send that information today to John Bogafetti in Parks, and I told him we'll get back to him once we start working on it.
That's the same time as the CAC meeting.
I can't help that.
IDA meeting.
That's at
No,
5:30.
that's-
What time is your meeting?
7:30.
This is on Tuesday.
Yes, I know. Is that 7:30?
No, 7 o'clock. When's the
IDA
IDA
is at
is on,
5:30 on the 11th.
they usually meet on Monday.
No, they changed it just recently because of the conflicts with the planning board being at 7:30, and they didn't wanna run into time
Well,
constraints, so they changed it to Tuesday.
Their meeting is usually over by 7
Your
o'clock
meeting's at
anyway.
7?
7, and we're gonna be in a little conference room.
Oh, you're gonna be over there. Okay.
And I prepared a slide program.
I'm
as
sorry.
well.
I'm sorry I missed that meeting. I'm gonna be at the CAC meeting.
I know
that
you
night.
are. That's okay. She's having the climate
Smart.
smart task force meeting.
All right.
Come on, you live in Montgomery. There's a lot to do
I can't be 2
here.
places at once, though. Can
I
you?
know, but this is, you know,
I know. I got you.
that's how we live here. That's how we roll. I can't help it.
All right.
A lot going on. But and also as part of the HPC, I have a big issue going on with the Colin family cemetery. And I discussed this with the planning board. Today, actually, I talked to Jim Wood at Hillendale. And so I guess since 1974, there's been an encroachment on the size of that Colin family cemetery. It is a state and nationally listed property. It's on the town landmark list. And really, our town preservation law talks about buildings, but we don't really have any teeth in there about things that aren't buildings. And there's 4 cemeteries listed in the town. So there's been an encroachment on the size of the acreage. And it's, with the recent sale, that was just perpetuated, and it's supposed to be a half acre, and it sure isn't.
Okay.
And the survey that was done and everything. So, I'll discuss it with the commission and we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Hillendale offered their services. They did a title search in 2015 on it, you remember? And so they offered their services to maybe help figure this out and going forward, because it's not considered an abandoned cemetery that the town would automatically take. Because it was a private cemetery. So we'll have to figure out what to do with that. And then also, and you'll send it to you, because I didn't do up the invite yet, but February 24th, the Walden Women's Club is gonna have a potluck supper. That's a Monday night at 6:30 at the First Reformed Church Fellowship Hall to honor the Josephine Louise Public Library. The trustees, the staff, and especially the manager. She's gone.
Charlie Frank still chair of that board?
No, I think
Mel?
maybe Jason is. Jason
Okay.
Trafton might be, but Charlie's still on it.
Okay. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Okay?
Anything else?
So you'll get the invitation.
Thank you.
Can you send that to the board?
She'll send it to the board. Thank you. Cherie?
I've been quiet all night. I figured you'd miss me. Good evening and thank you.
Good evening.
The first thing I'd like to say is kind of a positive thing maybe here is I noticed that when we read and we're a little nervous, we move our excuse me, paper. There used to be a podium, even a bandstand thing, that would really help the orators here who, when you get nervous, it would save time and expedite things perhaps. Yeah, there used to be one.
Yeah, we just saw it, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you know what I mean, you guys are very busy, we're very busy, we'd like to get to the point, and I hate reading something that I tried to craft and realize I've skipped 5 sentences because my hand is trembling out of nerves. Oh, I'm good.
In the
now.
future, yeah,
But I'm just saying.
She's off the cuff right now. She's not reading anything.
I've been off the cuff a long time, but in seriousness, I thought about that in the past couple of meetings, and with everything else, I just thought I'd bring it up because I think that would expedite some of the conversations and the comfort level. I noticed the woman here with the water, and she's holding all her books, so it allows some people maybe to organize their thoughts in themselves. Just a concept for the board to, in future, to help us out.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of for you, on Lakeview Drive near Beach, what I've noticed kind of happening, and with the wetlands all in there, there's a huge pile of salt near Beach. I'm talking, I could play in it, and that's just kind of really bad. So I just thought I'd bring it up. I know I'm not complaining, I'm just making you aware that that is a ton of salt. It's
an issue with one of the trucks in the.
But then we need to clean it up, don't we? I mean, if I make a mess, I'm supposed to clean it up, and I'm not saying you don't, and that you're not time constrained. I'm just saying to the board is, there is that wetland, and this is excessive. I'm talking, I could probably do all the beach with all this.
Down the hill or right by?
It's right near, just near the drain, like when you're.
Well, it's on the top and it's at the bottom. It's just, I guess when he distributed his salt,
Maybe
he just backing up and going forward, it's a little bit, it's really literally like that thick.
All right.
He's
We'll-
It's just an awareness,
Yeah.
so, so we go for it. And I also noticed, and I don't know if it's you or not, or what the town can do, but coming in on Lakeview, which is a town road, and me being the first house, as we all know, on the right, who just inherited a warehouse. The shoulder is getting incredibly broke down. And I don't know whether it's from the plow trucks or other vehicles pulling in and out. And I know you have to move, but the shoulder, when you come off of 17K and pull on the lake, coming from the east, going west and pulling in, that shoulder is eroding so deeply that there is now a well in there. And it actually starts pulling a lot of water in from the highway, and it starts driving it down our street. And more importantly, it pulls everything down into the property, follows along the road, comes across the driveway of my house, and then it starts filling up the plain between us and my neighbor's house. So we're kind of pulling in the highway. So I don't know what the town can do, if anything, because it does abut the highway, but that's kind of getting serious. And it's also getting to a depth that could start becoming dangerous to the gravel wheel if you should go off of it. So
It's on the state side or the actual lake?
it's when you pull off the state and you're just entering, so I don't know where your formal line is between you and 17K's easement. So, I mean, some conversation, just to help us keep that up, because it is deteriorating really bad now. I could take the salt, go in there, and make a little hot tub out of it, a salt water thing, okay? And as far as just a personal opinion on the auto thing, as a town, right? I think we need to set our standards, and we need to set them at the highest level. We are here to satisfy business, and we're also here to satisfy the roads of the town. I think as we open ourselves to different levels of use or exceptions, we open up that can of worms. We have enough problems in this town keeping up with what's going on, and we know it. Based on what the building inspector, all the cement things that were not inspected yet, we're behind. So I think when we evaluate that rule, we just set a precedent. If you're, and I understand automobiles and mechanics, and if you can't get an inspection, obviously you're not roadworthy. But I think that the onus on us to set what we want, right? And if you're a used car dealer, let's set a high standard. You bring in used cars to Montgomery. I mean, we're not that big. So, and if you want some bum car, you can go right down some other town, go to Newburgh, go to Mayberg, go to the auto place. So that's kind of, not Mayberg, but
Yeah,
I didn't mean Mayberg, I meant Newburgh. Not that, but in general, you understand what I'm just leading at. Let's make it very defined. If it's not a sellable car, it just shouldn't come here. There's no need to go there. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheree. Any other comments?
I just want to drop this.
Yeah, come on.
Thank you.
Got it?
So much
Okay.
easier.
All right, thank you so much.
See you tomorrow morning.
Yes, sir. Oh, Brian, are you gonna talk to her?
No, I'm going.
You're leaving? All right, good night.
Bye, Brian.
Good night, Brian.
Can I come with you?
Good
night, everybody. Good night.
Corey Shahakis. Also, I just had a question.
Yeah, sure.
This has been bugging me for the last several days. What is the policy that we have as a town to access planning board material if the secretary is not there? You have no backup from what I understand. I can't get the information, right? So I'm being denied, to some degree, timely information. And it's not just me, it's for all residents.
It's true.
And
I've had the same issue.
right, I mean, it's an ability for residents. I mean, obviously we were we're arguing back and forth with the planning board. They were ready to make a decision. I believe somebody mentioned it earlier about how they did this, got up and walked out and whatnot.
The executive session issue.
Whatever, yeah. But there's a thing there where we're sitting there, and this happened on several times, where they said, oh, the information just came in and we'll have to postpone it. But in this case, they had already scheduled to do the negative deck on this, they had to cancel it and they pushed it up and said, we're gonna do it on Wednesday. The work session, which is not no normal meeting time, I gotta work, so it makes it hard for me to get there. But I wanted to come to see what the information was they just got. And I come to learn the information they got supporting this project comes to the town at 12:23 on Friday afternoon. What time does the town hall close? 12:15. So I can't get it. So now I gotta go Monday. So I gotta try to get it Monday or have somebody go get it on Monday. They can't get it because you don't have anybody here helping out the planning board secretary. So I can't get that. Now it comes Tuesday, I finally get it. Now I get up 6 in the morning, I'm working, I don't get home till after 6, so by the time I get to read that information, it's 6:30 on Tuesday night, and their meeting is Wednesday morning to make that decision. How do I get to read and look at that information? Because when I read it, obviously there were parts that I disagreed with. It's the way the applicant slanted the report to support things, but the noise studies and things like that. So what do we do? What can you do? So for residents, I mean, can we get her help? I mean,
So that's a good question. We've been looking into that a little bit. We definitely gotta do a deep dive, and I don't have an answer for you right now,
no,
but I'll
I know
definitely
you don't,
look
but I
into it.
hear, and I agree with hiring part-time, you know, for parks, and I agree with that. But there's so much stuff going on in this town. It's not just me, whether you agree with the project or disagree with the project, whether you're a developer or an applicant, I don't care. We should have access to that information. And I called, and I called the town board, and they said, she's not here, there's nothing we can do, we can't get in there. So now I'm denied that, and I finally get that information the night before, less than 12 hours before they go to neg deck it. I tried to shoot off a letter, but they don't have time to read the letter, they don't see it, my opinion, because there were many things that we pointed out during that project that the planning board was missing. And you know, like wells that were not on the applicant's application that has DEC to be monitored, trees that were being planted directly under power lines that was supposed to act as screen that were gonna be cut. So I'm just saying, there's value to residents inputting to the information that is going before the planning board. So I don't know if you can go to the planning board and maybe suggest to them that anytime any new information comes in at the last minute, they have to automatically tell the applicant who's submitting it, you gotta push off that decision for X amount of days, whatever the law is.
Okay.
Right, because I don't have time to read it, and it's not fair for these planning board members to read this stuff at the last second and try to digest it with all the things that are going on in the town, so.
I hear you.
That's what I'm asking, what can we do to help the planning board out so residents can get the information?
All right.
It cannot stand that she's not here, she took her day off, whatever it is. We're all sitting here blind. That's not fair to the residents, or to anybody, applicants or whatever.
Okay.
So what can you do? You gonna look into it, or?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't have an answer for you.
No, I know, I mean, I hear you posting a part-time job for a parks guy, and I fully agree with that, so.
Well, if the need is, it comes back to us in our discussions, and there's a need for that, certainly something we would look into, but
Can
we
you
have to
also-
identify it a little
Can
bit.
you also maybe go to the planning board, I don't know if this is your purview or not, can you go to the planning board and say, look, anytime you get, you know, either draw a line in the sand. From this day forward, no more applicant
So
input
again-
and no more resident input.
So those
Let
things-
them have at least a week to think about and discuss things.
So those things will be an informal discussion at first, but we can look into all of our options, and I think the question you're asking is what authority do we have, and I think we need to look into that
I don't know.
and have a
I
greater
don't know.
discussion.
And
I don't either.
And I'm not saying to circumvent it, I'm just saying as a guideline, you know, Mr. Chairman, you get information at the last minute, then you gotta tell the applicant, hey, you just submitted this to us at the last second, you changed it.
I know, I hear what you're saying.
Because the applicant said, you must make this decision on this date.
I understand
So
what
the
you're saying.
applicant was dictating to the town what to do, and I disagreed with that.
I understand what you're saying.
Right? So,
Thank you.
I
Thank
have
you.
seen it at the planning board, the last couple of meetings where applicants are submitting information to the planning board at the very last
Yeah, it's
minute,
happened on multiple occasions on my project.
Even so much as other projects.
Okay.
Where they've submitted information and one of the members said, yeah, I ate it over dinner before I came here. So that is, just so that way you guys know.
I think it's part of our greater discussion on the moratorium and the bigger fix and the issues that we're, going through in terms of the overdevelopment. Yes, ma'am.
I know, really quick, 2 points, he made me think. One, in going through the process that we've just gone through, and I have a lot of issues with that, but mostly what I have come to learn is the town has no rights in setting the hours of operation for any business. And I know we have no noise ordinance because I've been to a house party that it was too bad for partying. So, what do? Because here I am, a resident, now with a warehouse, no limitations, and no ability for them to set that. So we're now going to live whatever comes our way. I understand there's noise studies being done, and we can go back and forth on those legitimacies, but I said I'm gonna leave that alone. I wanna bring the board, do you understand, that here we are, a residence abrupt to a warehouse, and the planning board has no tools, and it comes from you, the town board. So can we explore in our comprehensive plan, or even on the side, work with a lawyer, and create that ability for our planning board to set hours of operation?
All right.
That's a great idea.
And a noise ordinance, so when I go to parties and they're raging, you know, we don't have to tell the cops too bad, nah.
All right, before I read this letter from a resident who asked me to
Thank
read
you.
it, any other comments?
No.
Yes, ma'am.
Jane Farrell.
Do you want to come up here just so we can record? I'm sorry.
I think everybody knows.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, Sheree.
I meant to do that when I was up there.
Thank you,
Jane
Jane.
Farrell, Lake Osiris Road, and I just would like to support a noise ordinance. Last fall, I handed in a petition from on Lake Osiris Road concerning noise. I don't know whatever happened to it. I have a copy of the signatures. We had several signatures, which I could get to the town. It's not the original signatures, because the originals were handed in. But there was some concerns, and certainly with fireworks with pets, and we hear all the stuff about for vets, how,
PTSD.
yeah, how, and even other people who've had problems, but I have a dog that just goes nuts.
Yeah, sure.
And it's really hard. And the other thing is, in our town, is there any kind of ordinance with these signs that are put up? I know political signs go up election time, okay. But at the end of St. Andrews Road onto 52, we could have up to like 20 different signs for house, we pay cash for your house, handyman special, plowing, yard work. It's like a garbage collection at the end of Neely Town onto 416 too. It's,
No, certainly,
and
during the
do we have to
campaign,
pay for people's free advertising for their businesses on the road? Is that appropriate use? It
Yeah.
might be something to look at.
definitely, thank you.
Telephone pole in my office.
All right, there's nothing else. We have Mr. Bystrak, who, did I say that right? Bystrak, who has come to the town board. I met with him personally. He's, brings up issues, very spirited. He asked me to read this out loud. Thank you for reminding me, Councilman Brown.
Is that a signed letter?
Yes, I mean,
It got sent to all of us.
yeah, I
Is that
know.
a signed letter?
He does not have his,
So you know he wrote it?
yeah, I spoke with him on the
Because
phone.
usually, if a letter comes in that's not signed,
No, I spoke
I
with him.
ignore it.
I agree, I'm with you, but I did actually
Is he a
speak to
town of Montgomery resident?
Yes.
Yes,
How come it's addressed as Rock Tavern?
we have Rock Tavern addresses in the town of Montgomery.
You do?
Yes.
Yes.
Learn something every day.
The acceptance of the Sailfish Sewer Facility by Town of Montgomery has been strongly opposed at every planning board meeting in 2019. Most people were unaware, including myself, of building inspector's letter September 2018 agreeing to accept ownership of the plant when completed. In June 2019, the planning board finally decided they would not recommend taking over the facility after repeated objections from town residents regarding ownership of the plant. Shortly thereafter, an appeal to the town board was made to not overturn the planning board decision, but was ignored. Despite all this effort by the public to stop this takeover, it remains a clause in both the DEIS and FDEIS, and is most likely there at the request of town board attorney. This goes into a lot of specifics. I'm gonna leave it for Tara to have everything put into the record.
I have it too, and I will make sure.
All right, that it goes into the record, but in a nutshell, I think the issue that he brought to our attention, which I also brought to our attorney's attention, was the letter that was written by our building department. And Will, just for the record, I'd just like to clear this up. That does not bind us in any way in terms of conflicting with the seeker documents. It is very clear that the wastewater treatment plant, as part of Sailfish, Amazon, we do not have to take that on. It's only if and when we choose to.
That's correct, and as I mentioned when I was discussing this with Councilwoman Brown earlier, their most revised, most recent submission, I'll just read it again, just so we're very clear. Pursuant to the conditions of the site plan approval, the developer will record an offer of dedication for the wastewater treatment plant, which will provide the town an ongoing option to take the plant in the future or never. And that essentially they're acknowledging that the town is not bound to accept the wastewater treatment plant unless the town wants to. And that's their own submission, that's what they're saying. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, anything else for good and welfare from the board before we go into exec?
Can I get my
We
letter
have an
back?
audience.
Yeah.
I just have one very quick question. In going back through the applications and the information from Sailfish, I've noticed that things have changed. The original application is no longer online. Is this new revised report that you read from, is that now online?
The pilot? Go ahead.
Is that,
I don't know if this I don't know if the IDA has put this up online, this is an
Okay.
IDA document.
Okay.
because the
We can check into
original.
that.
We can find out, Barbara.
The original stuff is gone. Oof.
Okay.
I
This is
suspect they're gonna have this up before the meeting.
Okay.
Because I like doing a side-by-side comparison from, especially with an assignment, so that I can see what was originally in the application through the changes and corrections and modifications, so that I can compare them.
Yeah, we do the
side by
same thing
side.
when we present our
And
local laws, yeah.
The original is gone.
All right.
No longer there.
The town IDA does their own website, we just link to their website, so I don't know anything about that.
Can you mention it to them?
When I speak to the chairman, I'll mention it. Okay, Barbara?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for good and welfare from our town board before we go into executive session on a few items? What is the motion here? There's a couple different items.
The motion is to go into executive session to discuss specific personnel matters relating to specific town employees, and also to confer with counsel on matters of pending litigation.
Okay, anyone like to make that motion?
I have something for the good and welfare of you.
Oh, sorry.
How about this side of the table?
I mean, generally speaking, Ron, but go ahead.
If anybody wants to bring some items for the food pantry when you attend these meetings, put them in the corner, starting the next meeting. Let's make it the first meeting in a month, and I'll bring it to the food pantry. And if you can't get to a meeting, Sarah takes items for the food pantry downstairs.
What is it, just canned?
Yeah,
stuff?
You can't do any box goods.
Canned non-perishable items.
Box goods, canned goods, anything that's not perishable, I guess. Don't bring any hot dogs and meat. Something that I can put in.
Certain places can take meat.
Well, we can't.
We can't, we don't have fridge and freezer.
No,
This
they
place
usually
in
have
Cornwall does.
What is it you like to eat, Ron? I'll bring it for you.
Whatever you want. SpaghettiOs. I didn't eat dinner tonight, so.
Hey, neither have I.
Anything else, Cindy?
No, I'm good.
All right, anyone like to make the motion that
You
was?
know-
I'll make that
Hold
motion.
on.
Ron, that New York farmers actually were the second highest amount of pounds of food donated to food pantries for several years.
Excellent, excellent. For good of the order. Motion made by Sherry, seconded by Cindy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried.